Jeff, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks, Matthew, for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man. I feel like it's been forever in the making since we first kind of got introduced. Who was that? Todd Herb that introduced us, actually, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it was Todd. That was a while ago.
Yeah, well, that had to be maybe like March or something. It's been a minute.
Yeah, at least 6 months.
Yeah, I've definitely been on your products for at least 6 months. I mean, I wanted to
Yeah,
give it time anyways to see if I noticed any changes or what it looked like with my vitamins and mineral status. But yeah, it's been a while. We've been chatting back and forth, so I'm excited.
yeah. You were just going to Costa Rica.
Yeah, that was in April. Yep.
Yeah,
I think I started the products when I got back, actually, because I didn't want to start them before the big trip. You're right.
yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Time
All right.
flies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, why don't you tell everybody your background and what kind of got you obsessed in like the health world and zeolites?
Sure, there's a couple of main things that really brought me into it, but just from a childhood, I did have some personal health issues. So I mean, even a traumatic birth experience. But I was on antibiotics for most of my childhood. They never seemed to work, just constant infections. I had weird stomach issues. I remember my mom telling me that I just had weird stomach pain up until age 7. And she would have to push her finger into my belly button as hard as she could. And that was the only thing that would relieve the pain. And it was just weird. But that went away at about age 7. I remember we had this God healed Jeffrey party at the swimming pool and this big sign, all this stuff. But I was basically feeling really good after that point. And then there was a few things that kind of showed up later that I now recognize were probably pretty significant issues. For example, I couldn't drive in broad daylight without falling asleep behind the wheel. So that was
Hmm.
right, pretty significant. I mean, this is when I'm 16 years old. I remember on the way to the DMV to get my license renewed when I turned 17, I had a 15-minute drive in broad daylight, fell asleep behind the wheel. So serious yeast and fungal issues. I always felt drunk. I couldn't walk a straight line even without drinking. All this stuff going on, but still pretty highly functioning, playing sports, all that stuff. And then what really triggered things was when I went in for a physical in high school just to play sports. I went to like a free clinic to just get a high school physical. And they gave me, I was 18 at the time because I was a senior. So they gave me 3 injections, if you know what I'm talking about. And that really, right, I don't know if we can say that word, but that really kind of put me over the edge. And from that point on, just like pretty severe autoimmune reactions, relapses, recurring chronic viral infections, just all sorts of issues. And I'm not saying it was 100% those, but those were definitely a huge trigger. And at that point, I just started looking for something to help. And I went down the traditional medicine route, which just didn't help me at all. Then I got into functional medicine, which started helping me. And I said, okay, there's something more to it than the conventional model. There's a lot of great stuff out there. And I was kind of exploring that. And I actually got a job at a food sensitivity laboratory in Florida. Actually, I was in Florida for training and I was back. I was living in Hawaii at the time. So I was there trying to relax, getting sun, seeing my functional medicine doctor. Took this food sensitivity test. It helped me out a ton. I wrote a job proposal to the lab and said, hey, I'm going to come work for you to do research on food sensitivities and various autoimmune issues. So I'm doing this. And in the meantime, my grandma gets diagnosed with a late stage cancer. And this is right when I'd moved back to Iowa a number of years ago. This is probably 9 years ago now, eight years ago or so. And they gave her 6 hours to 7 days to live. And she's in her 80s at this point, and we're all there, and she's kind of at peace with it. But then her son had said something, and I prayed for her, and she decided that, you know what, let's try to fight this. And this was an incredibly fast-growing cancer. We saw her the week before, and she was fine. The next week, she was life-flighted to the hospital because she had a tumor so large in her throat she couldn't breathe. It was suffocating her. So incredibly fast-growing. This particular cancer, there was actually no one had ever lived past 2 years in recorded history, which she ended up doing, which I'll get to. But basically, she decides she's going to live after getting the diagnosis of 6 hours to live. And we're like, okay, what do we do from here? Right? The doctors were like, there's nothing you can do. You're just going to die. So she's like, well, I know this guy. He's my computer repairman. And then my grandpa chimes in. He's like, that guy's a con man. He's a con artist. Don't trust him. And it turns out And they live in a town of they lived in a town of 110, I think. At that, maybe it's 80 now. No one's living there. Rural Iowa, middle of nowhere, and it's their computer repairman that lives out in the country. And she's like, "No, this guy's got the answers." So we go over there, my mom and I, to this guy's house, kind of out, kind of off grid a little bit. And he introduces us to some pretty interesting technology. He's got, like Rife technology and all sorts of crazy stuff going on, just way out there. And he gives us a few supplements, and I'm like, why are these so expensive? It's like $600 for this stuff. He's like, well, this is not your average stuff. I'm like, all right. So we give it to her. She starts taking it. Bottom line, she stays alive for over 2 years, right? And we can't give all the credit to the supplements because she just had a conviction that she wasn't going to die. She was just refusing to die. She kept claiming, by the stripes of Jesus Christ, I am healed. And she just wouldn't die. And she was amazing, everyone. It was actually a really amazing experience because she feels like she fulfilled her life's purpose in those last 2 years of her life. Kind of amazing stuff, mending relationships, all that. But anyway, so I'm talking to this guy, and he's teaching me some of these kind of advanced scientific, technologies and stuff that I've obviously never heard of. And at this point, he's talking about like nanotech, and he's mining Bitcoin in his basement. This is like 8 years ago, and I've never heard of any of this stuff. But now I'm like, okay, that guy was a little bit ahead of the time. So that basically spurred my interest into supplements. I said, there's all these supplements out there, and I know a lot of them aren't doing that much, but these particular supplements he gave me, I'm like, there's something to it. They're a whole nother level. So I dug into the science of basically glycobiology, which is the study of sugar, but in particular polysaccharides, which are really the main immune regulators in nature. So when you look at the things that have incredible immune regulating properties like medicinal mushrooms, aloe vera, these things, it's these polysaccharides that are in them that are responsible for the immune regulation. And then there's even a deeper science into that where there's particular monosaccharides that have the therapeutic potential. So basically you've got traditional mushrooms, just normal like, button mushrooms or what you get in the store. They're healthy, but they're not medicinal. And then you've got these medicinal mushrooms. The difference is these polysaccharides, which saccharides are in there. Anyway, I dug into that. It's really interesting research and started a company called Glyco Life Sciences, which is based on the science of glycobiology, right? So I was basically taking the highest quality polysaccharide extracts I could find from various sources and combining them. And then in the research, I discovered that not only do you need the proper quality product, but you need the proper dose. Because with some of these supplements that were on the market that were branded with clinical research, and the research you need incredibly high doses, but on the nutritional supplement labels, the doses were tiny because they were such expensive products. So basically, I was promoting kind of mega dose nutraceuticals. This was like 8 years ago. I had a sign on my car that said mega dose nutraceuticals. I don't know what I was thinking. Like that was going to sell something for me. It was kind of hilarious because I set up a clinic for mega dose nutraceuticals. Anyway, that's how I got in. That's how I kind of got into it. And then I said, all right, this is cool. What else is out there? I got into, did some functional medicine training. Started looking into biohacking technology. Opened up a clinic, mostly for my own personal benefit, just because I like the stuff. So I had, full body cryotherapy, oxygen therapy, full body red, infrared light, sauna, vibe plate, molecular hydrogen, just all the fun stuff, right? Just a biohacking center. Opened that up, kind of combined functional medicine with biohacking. And then it was after all of this that I discovered zeolite. And that's kind of what brought me to where I am now, because after I was using all this great technology, using it with clients, and all this is good stuff, right? We're getting good results. But when I found zeolite, I said, okay, there's something special here. And I was experimenting with it as I do with everything, and just discovered that there's incredible healing potential in it. But like everything else, it has to be used properly. And it's a little bit of a paradox. So what I discovered was it's one of the most potent products on the market, but also potentially one of the most misunderstood. And that's what I've dedicated the last couple of years to, is basically kind of researching it, providing education on what it is and how to use it effectively to get the proper results, which leads me to this company I have now, which is Zeolite Labs, which is basically a next generation zeolite supplement where it's just an incredible product. And I'm trying to really provide the education so people know what it is, because there's a lot of misinformation and just garbage marketing out there when it comes to zeolite.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to circle back and talk about, it's funny, we have kind of these parallel paths I've talked about a little bit on the show, where I was had a lot of immune problems too as a child, and I was had all these ear infections. I didn't have quite the I don't remember at least having a lot of stomach issues, but I would have chronic ear infections. I had like 12 different ear surgeries. I've had both of my eardrums reconstructed. Like they basically like cut behind my ears and like flipped my ear open. And, I had lost some hearing for a long time. I still probably definitely don't hear 100%, but I don't wear hearing aids. But in that, I was probably doing like, I don't know, 3, 5, 6 rounds of antibiotics a year. Like every time I would have an infection, they would just give me another one. And I know you'll probably listen to that show I just did with Clark that's coming out this week. He got into some research around how like antibiotic use can like double the half life of mercury in particular, but makes you wonder if it does that with other metals as well. So I think that's super interesting because I had a bunch of mercury fillings. I'm not sure if you had the amalgams or not, but I know a lot of people in that era did. I had probably had 8 of them and was on the antibiotics all the time. And then as I went through, it's kind of same as you. I noticed that I would like fall asleep in school a little bit, but I was still kind of like lifting all the time and playing sports. And it wasn't until I kind of got older where I really shut down for sure. But what I wanted to ask before we get into zeolites is what were the supplements that this random prepper out in Iowa gave your grandma? Was it the medicinal mushrooms?
Right. Well, in part, the main thing was actually an aloe vera extract. The
Ah,
ingredient is called bialo. So it's a bioavailable aloe vera. Ace mannan is the polysaccharide in aloe. So it was an ace mannan extract. There was this doctor, PhD Santiago Rodriguez from Mexico, basically just perfected the processing of aloe vera. People can check it out. The laboratory is called Laurent Labs, laurentLabs.com, and they sell it to different ingredient manufacturers. But that's where I ordered it from. So he actually had his order straight from the manufacturer because he had a connection. So we got this bag of it for like $600 just for the
mm,
powder. Because if you find this stuff in the supplements, because it's so expensive, they just give you a pinch of it, a couple hundred milligrams or 80 milligrams. We're taking thousands of milligrams a day, and that's still to this day one of my favorite ingredients, and I use it a lot in various products. But that was one thing. He also recommended he was doing silver, so he had both colloidal silver. He also had the pH structured silver, and I think that was before the pH structure came out. But once again, he kind of had a connection with it, so we had some jars of that, which was some good stuff. He had some algae, AFA, that algae from Klamath Lake, that clean algae. She was on that. There was some cordyceps mushroom, I believe, was one of them. He had a number of things. The things she was most consistently taking were the silver and the aloe vera, though. Those were the two. And then kind of intermittently, she was on some other stuff. But she ended up in a nursing home where they were really limiting what they were allowing her to take. So she kind of was able to get away with the silver because we were disguising it as water. Um, and the aloe, we were kind of sneaking it in there too. And then she did the technology. Probably the biggest thing was the technology. So she had like the Rife technology. She had some. Um, he actually invented the device, so I don't know what the device was, but it was kind of similar to like an electron charger, where you've got the plasma, these tubes and the light and the various frequencies are running through it, and it's kind of ozonating the body. And really interesting because after a few hours, you could actually like smell ozone oozing out of your armpits, and so she was doing a lot of that, which really helped raise her oxygen levels. When they tested her, her blood oxygen was at 100, and they said we've never seen this before. So we attributed that to this technology. She was doing some far infrared and near infrared light therapy as well, kind of directed at the cancer. And so a number of technologies, but and then a lot of prayer. So
yeah.
those were the big ones.
Yeah, people underestimate the power of prayer. I think it
Yeah.
helped me quite a bit when I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I just felt like I was dying every day in and day out. And I wasn't much of a praying guy, but I turned into one. I didn't really know what else to do. I don't know if your grandma, older generation, she probably might have already had faith and went to church or whatever. But I just started praying out of nowhere. Like it was just like
Right.
necessity. Like I just needed an answer from somebody, and I think it was kind of like a guide in some way to kind of keep putting me in different positions or, someone introducing me to someone, I think you should try out this doctor or this protocol. And over time it's worked out. So that's cool. For anybody who doesn't know, why don't you explain what a Rife machine is while we're just kind of chatting about that?
Sure. So Rife technology. Well, there was a guy, Dr. Rife back in, I think it was the 1930s or 40s, who was doing a number of experiments and basically discovered that there was various frequencies, resonant frequencies, that were able to shatter cancer cells and basically microbial cells. So the best way to explain it, in my opinion, this is how I explain it, is if you imagine an opera singer who, first of all, everything resonates on a specific frequency or vibration. So that's foundational to understand. Now, if you have an opera singer that's well trained with enough power in the voice, this individual can shatter a wine glass. And that's if the frequency or pitch or vibration, kind of those are interchangeable words, if that frequency can match the frequency of the wine glass, and if you can have enough power for a long enough duration, they'll resonate together, kind of shake up and shatter. And that's what Rife technology is for microbes. You can emit the frequency, it's called a resonant frequency of, a specific parasite or a bacteria or a cancer cell or whatever it may be. And if you have the right delivery system and the right power for the long enough time, it will shatter that cell. So that's basically what Rife technology is. There's different ways to administer it. There's light. You can get Rife through light. It's traditional, but you can also administer these resonant frequencies through like PEMF or some other methodologies as well. But Rife is kind of debatable whether his technology still exists because the lab was destroyed, as a lot of things get destroyed when there's breakthroughs in cancer. But yeah, so that's kind of the debate. There's a lot of devices on the market. Some of them are better than others, but it definitely works. If you've ever tried resonant frequencies, people can feel a difference, especially if they've got chronic Lyme or some sort of microbial issues. They have these killer frequencies, and it can really knock them out because it kills stuff fast.
No, I'll agree. I'm going to do a whole show one day on Rife. Maybe I'll reach out to the people from Spooky too or something, or
Yeah.
Tom Palladino is pretty good too. I'm not sure if you've ever looked into his scalar light product. It's kind of another one of those ones where you just send in a photo and then they put the photograph of you within their technology, and then they run different programs or whatever depending on the package that you choose. But I noticed detox symptoms with the scalar light, and I for sure, funny enough, as I was asking a lot of these doctors if I had every time I would go to a doctor, I would be like, do you think I have mercury toxicity? Do you think I have heavy metals? I've been doing research, and they would all kind of just tell me I was stupid, or not really that, but they kind of just brush it off oh, you got Lyme, or you have this, you have adrenal fatigue, all these other labels they would slap on everything. And when I bought that Spooky too, there's a broad detoxification program you can run where every day it kind of changes, and there's one's heavy metals, one's parasites, one's this. And I swear I would feel awful every time it would get onto the mercury setting. And I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, I think I have some mercury in my brain from the amalgam fillings, or just eating a lot of cheap tuna when I was trying to be, I never really did bodybuilding shows, but I would do bodybuilding diets and try to go to the gym all the time. And I'm I swear I have some heavy metal toxicity of some sort. And funny enough, the highest metal on my OligoScan is mercury, cadmium on the OligoScan, but the most metal that I see coming out in my hair test is definitely mercury. So I was onto something the whole time, and they were sending me down other avenues, I think. But it's funny. But yeah, if anyone's never looked into Rife, or maybe some parasites or some bacteria, I'm not sure how well it really gets to the metals, because I do think you need to kind of mop those up or have some minerals to replace those. But I do think it's actually better for more pathogens, in my opinion, like bacteria, Lyme, Epstein-Barr, some of these things that can kind of create biofilms and, kind of avoid supplements sometimes. So it's just another technology and another tool in the toolkit, but I don't think it's the ultimate cure-all, at least not for heavy metals, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Because metals aren't alive, so it's hard to kill them. That's kind of the whole point of the right. You can still help detox with them, but yeah, I'd say it's a little bit more limited. There's another side to the frequencies as well. You've got the resonant frequencies, but then you've got the healing frequencies. So with the Rife machines, you can actually put on, basically you can do biofeedback on your organs. So you can basically, it's they call it tuning sometimes, where you're replaying the frequencies that a healthy liver resonates at, and you're playing those back to your body. And so there's other things too where it can be beneficial and you can combine. But like the Rife resonant technology is more of a killer. And yeah, so for Lyme, a lot of people use it for chronic Lyme, just because sometimes the supplements or even the antibiotics or whatever might not be able to get to the deeply hidden Lyme, but a frequency can go throughout the entire body, right? It's not being inhibited by anything. It doesn't have to be carried through the bloodstream or any of that. So that's why I think for that kind of stuff, it can be helpful. But I don't think it's a standalone. I think it has to be used in conjunction with other things to make sure you're doing it safely and not putting too much stress on the body.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot you can run like detox support. I forgot and get like
Yeah.
some organ, just help the kidneys, help the liver when you are moving stuff around. And that's definitely a good move to use Scalar in that way if you are actively using Zeolite or some other detox protocol, for sure. It's kind of like reminds me, I've never tried it, but like how homeopathics work, you can use like some liver and some kidney style homeopathics when you're doing a detox as well. And I've heard people get good results with that. Kind of reminds me of something like that, but it's just a technology that you buy and then you don't have to mess with it. And I liked the spooky too because it was remote. You took off like a little clipping of your nail, your fingernail, and then you put it into the little like plastic piece that they sent, and it hooks into the generator. And through that you can send a remote whatever program you want to your body, so you don't have to be like actually sitting next to the Rife machine. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it was like the cheaper one was only like $600, so it wasn't much of like didn't break the bank to just try it out. So it was pretty cool. I liked playing with that for a while for sure.
Yeah. I had the spooky. I had to get rid of it because I mean it's by far the cheapest and most affordable product on the market for what it is. But I had this clinic, and this is in Iowa where things are a little bit behind the times, right? So I'm trying to introduce this concept of biohacking and from a science-based perspective. So I bring the spooky in, and I had to keep it in the back room with the door locked because the spooky device has a picture of like Casper the Ghost as their logo. And people like I can't have these doctors coming in. I'm trying to be like, oh, this is all science based. This is great. And then they're like, what's this thing? Oh, this is the frequency device. And like, what's the. So that's the only reason I had to get rid of it. It was kind of funny, but yeah, it's. I mean, a lot of people are using it for the price. You can't really beat it.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I forgot you did tell me that on the phone the one time. That's so funny, man.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know why. I think I remember reading why it's called spooky and why that's the logo, but I totally forgot at this point. But that's hilarious. But all right, well, let's get into the topic at hand. You have this super unique zeolite. For anyone who's not listening, what exactly is a zeolite? Where does it come from?
Yeah, so it's from the earth. Zeolite is a classification of mineral. So that's the first thing to understand when you hear the word zeolite. It's a broad spectrum class. So there's a number of naturally occurring zeolites in the Earth's crust, and it's a volcanic mineral. So it's formed when volcanic ash will hit the seawater, and it'll form this mineral called zeolite. And there's different types of zeolite. So for when we're talking about for human consumption, we're referring to a type or a class of zeolite called clinoptilolite. And that's the one that's used because that is the one that has human clinical studies, and it's a different structure because some of the zeolites are going to be toxic and you don't want to inhale them, you don't want to be around them. They've got sharper edges, and they're not well researched. So we're talking, when I say zeolite in this interview, I'm talking about studied clinoptilolite zeolite. But basically it's very unique because it has this negative ionic charge by nature, which makes it attracted to positively charged elements. So just from the earth, and I think it's kind of why it exists in nature, is because it comes from a volcano, right? So when a volcano erupts, it results in a bit of toxicity, right? During the process, there's fire and all that. And the zeolite, I think, is there to kind of clean up the environment. So because it has this, so in the body, it does a similar thing. And we'll talk about the processing and all that. But basically, when you take a zeolite product, it's this micronized mineral with a negative charge that, like a magnet, binds to positively charged toxic elements. And the positively charged elements in your body are a lot of times the toxic things that you don't want, like the heavy toxic metals, the glyphosate, the ammonia, the mycotoxins, and all sorts of other things. Now, what makes zeolite unique compared to a lot of other binders is that it's a smart or selective binder. Because most other things just go in and they start grabbing everything, because that's what they do, right? They're chelators or they're binders. Zeolite works in a different mechanism. It's a swap mechanism. So naturally occurring, the zeolite has some minerals. It has magnesium, potassium, sodium and calcium. It has electrolytes. And what it does is it actually trades what it has. It's a cage-like structure. Let me back up. So when it's formed, it has this kind of a honeycomb cage, and it's able to trap things in its cage, opposed to just grab them onto the surface, which is one reason it makes it a little bit of a stronger binder. But it doesn't just grab, it swaps. So in the body, let's say you take some zeolite and it has magnesium in its cage, it comes across some mercury. It's going to trade the magnesium for the mercury because it has a higher level of affinity or attraction for the mercury, mainly because it has a higher atomic weight. So that's why if it comes across other minerals, it leaves them alone because it already has the mineral it prefers. It only trades for something it likes more. Now, there's a downside to that where it can swap, because people will say, well, that's great. It's never going to let go. It's a strong binder, but there's more to the picture. Because let's say you take zeolite, it swaps magnesium for mercury, then it comes across some lead before it's excreted for the body. Zeolite's more attracted to lead than mercury. It will then swap again. It'll swap the mercury for the lead. And now you've got free-floating mercury. And that's where kind of dose and all that comes in handy. So I'll stop there and let you comment. I might have missed a bunch of info there.
No, that's good. One thing I want to back up on is you kind of touched on it, not having the sharp edges, and maybe that would be cool for people to kind of dig into a little bit, because there's like a whole camp of people, and I did use it for a while, that use diatomaceous earth, and they love that because it has the sharp edges. Apparently it has, it's sharp enough to kill off parasites and things like that. But one thing I did really notice is I got really constipated. Like I felt really good, and then if I did the dose that was recommended in this like protocol that I was on, I would have trouble using the bathroom. So I kind of was like trying to use a lot less. And so I was like, I don't really like anything. When I'm trying to detox, I don't want anything that's backing me up at all. But it did feel like my gut felt clean. But then as like, if I can't use the bathroom, I'm like, this is counterintuitive. But so what would be the reason that you would want the soft edges instead of the sharp edges for anybody who's
Sure.
dug into the diatomaceous earth stuff?
Right. So they're for completely different purposes. So when you think of like, the zeolite products, they're for detoxing heavy metals and other toxic elements. And when you look at diatomaceous earth, it's more of a killing of microbes because of the edge. So the diatomaceous earth is really not a very effective chelator or binder. It's basically used because it has such a sharp edge that it'll go in and rip off the exoskeleton of the parasites and allow the immune system to attack them. I mean, it's also used in for pest control and around the yard because it does the same thing. It'll, for roaches and various other insects, it'll kind of rip off their exoskeleton, they'll dry out and die. So that can be beneficial in an antimicrobial protocol, but it's not really, when I not really detox for the toxic elements besides the microbes. So completely different. The other thing I would be concerned with is because it is such a sharp structure, is that going to be, damaging your cell? It's just going in, it's just kind of ripping stuff apart, especially if you have leaky gut, where this stuff could potentially leave the gut and get into the bloodstream. And now you've got this sharp, mineral structure in there kind of ripping things apart. I mean, I'm not really, because I've taken it before and then I kind of started thinking about it and said, maybe this isn't the best idea. I mean, if that's the only thing you had access to and you had a severe parasite issue, yeah, it's probably going to do more harm than good. But since there's so many great alternatives for parasite and microbial cleansing, including like the Rife technology we just talked about, I say, I stay away from diatomaceous earth just for that reason.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Just the constipation alone kind of turned me off. It's really cheap to try if it's effective for you. I mean, it is what it is. It was definitely like a whole bag was relatively cheap, so you can find that on Amazon. There's some good brands on there. Before we keep talking about zeolite, you talked about it being like a selective, chelator type of product. And so I think about maybe we can get into like other binders before we deep dive into zeolite, and maybe talk about why you don't like the bentonite clays or activated charcoal. Is it mainly because they don't have that selective capacity and they do bind minerals? Or let's dive into some other binders before we do zeolite.
Sure, and it's not that I don't like the others, I just like the zeolite so much more. I just right. So that's the thing. It's back. It's always there's a lot of ways to get from point A to point B, I tell people with your health. I'm always looking for the most effective and the most efficient. Right? So it's all what you have access to. It's great now because we have access to things from all over the world with great scientific advances. So one thing that I think zeolite has made zeolite so effective, more so than the clays and the other things at this point, is the scientific breakthrough. So I say it's a solution from nature supercharged by science and innovation, right? So 30 years ago, probably the activated charcoals and the bentonite clays and those things were actually more effective. But now, through the advanced scientific breakthroughs, we can process the zeolite in a way where it's become safer and more effective. So I'll say that to begin with. But I mean, I can't argue with some of the health benefits of activated charcoal and some of the clays because they've been used for so long with great benefit. But there are definitely limitations. I mean, just one, there you have to take them away from food. You have to take them away from supplements. You can't take them long term generally because they're going to be just going in and grabbing stuff, and that could be helpful because for short term, if you've got all sorts of toxicity, like if you were just poisoned with something, yeah, you want to take something to bind that up so it doesn't all redistribute in your body. But long term, it's not that effective in my opinion, and it can cause the constipation issues. It can just result. I think it's more of an inefficient detox, and it's not a selective or smart binder. So one, it can't be taken long term. Two, it causes more symptoms. And three, you can't take it at a high enough dose, I think, to get the therapeutic results in a lot of people because you're just going to be stripping more minerals. It's going to be causing more constipation, more stress on the body. It's just a stressful detox experience. Some are worse than others, I think. But with zeolite, because it is a smart binder, we found that you can take it at incredibly high doses and it does not impair mineral status or vitamin status, and it's tolerated better. And I think, and one of the things we'll get into either now or later is the dose theory I developed with zeolite, because even zeolite, if used improperly, is an absolute disaster. So a lot of people that have experimented with zeolite, almost all of them have used it improperly and they haven't gotten as good of results as they could have gotten. And that's generally one, it's either the wrong product or they're taking it at the wrong dose. Because what we discovered is taking a higher dose of zeolite is not only much more effective than a low dose, but it's gentler and safer on the body. Because a low dose results in an inefficient detox process, which can stress out the body, result in redistribution of toxic elements, make you feel terrible, and that's going to limit your detox. Where a higher dose, it's just more of an efficient detox. Now, if you took a higher dose of some of the other binders, it's possible that you could get some of additional benefit, but you just can't do it because they're not smart binders. So that's the challenge. That's why I think zeolite kind of is set apart. I'll let you comment and I'll go into more depth on any of that.
Yeah, no, that was good. I just wanted to touch on some of the other binders. I took activated charcoal for a while, especially when I moved out of mold, and it had a really good effect. You know, you take some activated charcoal from before you get in the sauna or whatever, and I was sweating out mold. You know, it would definitely clear some brain fog and stuff. So it did what it was supposed to do in the time, but I think I was using it for way too long, and then I'd heard some reports of people like going to the hospital because their electrolytes were messed up and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, let me jump off of these, and kind of swore off binders until I was introduced to you actually. And before we get into the higher dose, because that I think that we can kind of touch on that for a while, because that's like a new revelation for people. You kind of talked about some of the processing and the technology, and maybe we can get into why your zeolite's just different in general before we talk about dose specific. Because I know you say that it's supercharged. There's different particle sizes, and then we'll get into dose. So tell us why the Zeolite Lab stuff is just different in general.
Sure. So when you start with zeolite, everyone's starting with this. There's different zeolite mines. So one, we have a proprietary mine that's only used for human consumption. So you can get zeolite for dirt cheap. You can order. I order zeolite from a mine in the U.S. for ice melt for my 500-foot driveway. Right. I'm not going to put that stuff in my body, but you can get it, and that's what a lot of these companies are doing. Is they're taking zeolite from these commercial mines, which is often going to be contaminated with diesel and all sorts of other stuff, and it's not going to be cleaned at all because that's incredibly expensive. And then they're putting it in supplements or they're further processing it. That's issue number one. So we've got a really good source. And when you look at the third-party analysis of it, we're at 94% actual cleanup tillolite. So that's the active zeolite present. When you look at a lot of the other ones, they're like 60, 70, 79%. And then the other is just kind of other matter that's not really doing anything, but you want as high of a percentage as possible. So we're at 94%. So that's number one. The mine location. We've got a proprietary cleaning process because naturally occurring, the zeolite is going to have some contamination because of its negative charge. So it's going to be pulling onto some of pulling the heavy metals, mycotoxins, and various things from the earth. So it has to be cleaned, which almost no one does. So we go through the cleaning process, and then from there, it is micronized. So this is where, and a lot of the companies, not a lot, a few of the reputable companies are doing that. They have a good mine, and then they clean it. And then where the products really are differentiated is from the next process, which is micronization. Now, micronization is where they take the zeolite, because this is like a big rock. It looks like a big mineral, right? And then it's sliced into smaller particle sizes. Now, the traditional method of crushing zeolite is just commercial milling, where it's just like a crushing motion to reduce the particle size. That could cause an issue because it could damage the structure of the zeolite cage for one, and you can't get it as small. So that's what a lot of companies are using. We're using micronization, which is a little bit more advanced, much more expensive, where we can get the particle sizes much smaller. And instead of crushing the cages, we're slicing them so it keeps the cages intact. So we can basically take the zeolite, and this is where the science comes in. We can take the zeolite after it's been cleaned and we have the good source and all that stuff, and we can put it to whatever particle size we want. And that's where the difference is from ours with a lot of products, because zeolite's not a product like a lot of others where they're just all private labeled and everything's the same. They're all very different. They're all different sources, they're all different processes, etc. So you have liquids and you've got powders and you've got nano zeolite. Those are kind of the three classifications on the market. So traditionally you had the powders. So they did all this stuff, they micronized it, and they had a powder. Generally it just stays in the gut to act as a nice GI binder, right? Kind of like a charcoal bentonite clay, except probably better because it is selective and it's not depleting nutrients. That's great. Then you had this movement, and this is all recent. Zeolite's only been around for 25 years on the market. So that's another reason some people are skeptical, because there hasn't been it hasn't been 100 years to study it. But it's quickly becoming recognized as one of the most powerful things, and it's becoming incredibly popular, as you probably can see if you're on social media. So unfortunately, probably not all the best products. But you have the powders, and then you had this movement of the liquids, where they said, initially what they did is they just took the powder and they just mixed it with water. And they sold it as a liquid. So there's a problem. And that's how a lot of it's just because it's sold better. Because a lot of people say, I don't want to take this chalky stuff, mix it with water. So they would just take it, mix it with water. They referred to it as a liquid zeolite and marketed it. And it was kind of a scam, in my opinion. So there was that. Now, the technology has advanced from there with these companies, where now they have further micronized the product where it's smaller. So now when you look at a liquid zeolite product, it might be the same size as some of the powders, even though they're marketing it as nano, or it might actually be nano or smaller. So you really have to inquire about this, because even some of the popular brands, it's just straight zeolite powder mixed with water, and you get terrible detox reactions from it, so people assume it works, but that's just because it's a low dose, as we'll get into later. Now, the nano zeolites are a little bit different operation. With the nano zeolites, what they've done is take the zeolite cage and micronize it so far that you have these nanoparticles. They're tiny, and they're putting a very small amount of that in water, and they're referring to it as a nano zeolite. And the concept there is that we're going to have these particles so small that they can leave the gut and they can cross the blood-brain barrier and have this full body or cellular detox. So that's kind of the concept there. There's a few companies doing that. And then you have got the liquids who kind of combine them, and then there's all sorts of stuff going on. So basically, what we've done is we've kind of looked at all the products on the market, and we took what we thought were the best products in terms of particle size, and we combined them into one. Because what some people were doing were taking the liquid zeolites and they were taking a powdered zeolite at the same time, so you get the GI effect and you get the full body detox. So we've combined all of those benefits into one product. Now, I will say we don't have as small of zeolite particles as some of the super nanos, because we don't want them that small. Because some of these, if you look at some of the zeolite products that are like 2 nanometers, or at least they're claiming they're 2 nanometers, that's ridiculously small. When you look at, when you look at a micron, it takes 1,000 nanometers to get to a micron. And if you look at just the particle size of various contaminants, there's no way that zeolite's going to be able to actually trap the toxic element. Because remember, they have this cage-like structure. You've got to be able to fit the toxin in the cage for it to be an effective detox. So If you, like mold is like 3 microns or larger. So if you have two, there's no way a nanometer product is going to be able to touch mold. Now, mycotoxins are a little bit smaller, but still like 100 nanometers. So there was this kind of race with the liquid zeolites to get the smallest possible particle size. I don't know why, but that's just how it was. Now, so we have these products. There's virtually nothing in the products, but they're very, very small particles. Now, it is a very expensive process to make, and that's why they're so expensive. They're $80, $100 for a bottle that has less than 1 milligram of zeolite per serving, because it's expensive, and plus they're liquids, and plus a lot of them are multi-level marketing and they have to be higher priced, whatever the reason. Now, I will say, when you have a smaller particle size of zeolite, it does increase the surface area. So it does, to some capacity, make it more effective, but only to a certain extent. So let's say you have a zeolite powder that has 20 microns. There's some of those on the market. That's the micron is just a particle size. Then you have a zeolite product that is 15 micron. The 15 micron, if it's the same exact zeolite, the 15 micron zeolite product is going to be more effective because it's been sliced further and it has a broader surface area. So I will say that. But what these companies have done is taken that and made it so small that while it's increasing the surface area, the cages are just too small. So we don't have anything in like the 2 or 3 nanometer. Now we've got sub 1 micron, which is incredibly small. When you're looking at a red blood cell, it's 5 to 7 micron. When you're looking at a white blood cell, it's larger. So we still have things that are less than a micron that are going to be, they're small enough, right? We don't have anything too small where it's not going to be effective, basically. And I don't want to say all the other products are not good, because I'm not going to say that. Some of them are going to be better than others. I've just found that ours is kind of a combination of the best, and it seems to work better. One, because of the purity, and two, because people are able to get a high enough dose to get the results. Because that's really where the key is. It's the quality and the quantity. You can have the best quality product in the world. If you're not taking it at the proper dose, you're not going to get the results. And with a lot of products, including mostly the liquids, you just can't get a high enough dose to get the therapeutic effects and have an efficient detox.
Yeah. So the recap for people is you have basically like a broad spectrum. You have multiple particle sizes because you're working on the gut and you want the smaller ones to get into the bloodstream, potentially going through the blood-brain barrier, or at least maybe grabbing, if you're using some other detox protocol that's already moving stuff out of the blood-brain, from the brain. In my opinion, I like mineral balancing. I mean, whatever that may be for you. That's what I like to get and deep into the brain. And I think the minerals work really well for that, for the ionic mimicry stuff. And then I use yours to kind of mop up any excess. And so it's like multiple particle sizes. It's really clean, which I think most people need to look into if they're taking a different product, because of its capacity to bind with toxins. You're going to definitely want to make sure that it is clean. That was one of my questions, but you kind of answered it anyways. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If something's going to bind toxins inside of your body and your system, it'll also do that in nature. We see that with plants, with chocolate. I mean, kind of anything that grows in dirty soil, they grab onto things, and then even more so zeolite, because it's specifically a binder. So you definitely want to make sure it's clean. You got different particle sizes. And then on the back end, it sounds like you remineralize the zeolite yourself, right? What's that process like?
Right, exactly. So after it's clean, if you're washing out the minerals that are naturally occurring, because you're washing everything else out, if you don't remineralize it, you're probably going to be binding to some essential stuff, right? Just like the other things. So we have to remineralize it with ionic trace minerals, electrolytes, so that there are electrolytes present for exchange. And if you look at our third-party testing, you'll see that one, it doesn't have, it's not infected with, or doesn't have heavy metals, and it does have the electrolytes present for exchange: the calcium, potassium, sodium, and magnesium. Another thing to note on our third-party testing is the silicone to aluminum ratio. And one of the concerns, and before I want you to remind me to ask me about the brain, detoxing the brain with the nanozeolites, because I've got some interesting things on that. But first, I want to finish this thought.
Okay.
So, a lot of people are concerned with aluminum toxicity when it comes to zeolite. So zeolite is by nature an aluminosilicate, meaning it's primarily comprised of aluminum and silicon. That's one of the main reasons people stay away from zeolite, is because there's information claiming that zeolites will leach aluminum into your body and cause aluminum toxicity, which is a fair concern based on its structure. And what it needs to be understood is that the clinoptilolite zeolite is a very sturdy structure that doesn't break down in the body. So it's not a bioavailable mineral that the body's using for any cellular purpose. It's simply passing through, grabbing onto toxic elements, and then leaving the body. Now, if it were to break down, then yes, it could definitely cause an issue because aluminum is part of its structure and you could cause aluminum toxicity. Now, you also have synthetic zeolites, which I didn't mention. And some of the synthetic zeolites are being sold as supplements, marketed as lab grown or something like that. Those are man made, and I would stay away from those as well, personally, because they're not natural. And there's at least one study showing that asynthetic zeolite that's available does cause aluminum toxicity. So, yes, some zeolites probably do cause aluminum toxicity. ZeoCharge does not. Now, clinoptilolite in general, that's another reason clinoptilolite was chosen as the form of zeolite to be used for humans, is because it has a high ratio of silicon to aluminum. And it's the high ratio of silicon to aluminum that determines the stability of the zeolite structure. So if you have these other forms of zeolite, they're likely going to break down in your body. That's why they're not used. Clinoptilolite is higher, it's stable, as long as it's natural. Now, ours has an even higher silicon to aluminum ratio than all the other ones that we've seen. Ours is almost 75% silicone. It's got over a 6-to-1 ratio of silicone to aluminum compared to a lot of others, which are much lower. So ours is even more stable than the others, but even the others are going to be pretty stable. So there's no research showing that natural zeolites cause any sort of aluminum toxicity, only the synthetic. So that's one thing to mention. Also, the other thing that really sets our product apart is the proof, right? So I'm saying a lot of things, and so everyone else wants to make these claims, but before launching the product, we actually did a case studies program to actually see what the product could do. So that's the three things that set ZeoCharge apart: purity, particle size arrangement, and proof. So, because if we're being completely honest, I looked at the literature, and I did not think that our zeolite was going to result in any sort of aluminum toxicity, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I couldn't prove it. So what we did was we took a bunch of people and put them on various doses, some high doses of the ZeoCharge, and this is prior to launch. And we saw what we just looked at the results, and the results were very promising. One of the things that we noticed was that not only does the ZeoCharge not cause aluminum toxicity, but it has a pretty significant aluminum detoxing effect. So that was number one thing. So we're really the only zeolite product on the market that can prove that our product does not cause aluminum toxicity. And we're looking at the tissue level. So from the level of aluminum in the tissue, no accumulation, and there was a reduction. In addition to that, we saw that our ZeoCharge product was able to remove all 15 heavy metals that we tested it against from the tissue level, so it can prove that we offer a full body detox, which no one else can prove. We also can show that not only does it not bind to essential minerals, but a lot of times it improves essential mineral status, and it improves vitamin status. And this is all available for people to view on the case studies page on the website, zeolitelabs.com. So all these things are published. So that's why, because we wanted to, we're in this to help people, right? I think there's two types of companies that put profits first and companies that put people first. We want to put people first, profits second, right? So if the product was going to cause harm, we weren't going to sell it. So we did the case studies first, right? Because we wanted to be sure. So we were very relieved and pleasantly surprised that, one, it wasn't causing aluminum toxicity, and two, it was able to work so effectively. I'll stop there.
Yeah. I'm glad you touched on that, because that was one of my questions. I think that's a big reason, and for good reason, that a lot of the mineral balancing people don't trust zeolite, be specifically because of the aluminum. And what you're saying is that the silicone to aluminum ratio matters a lot. And if I'm getting that correctly, it sounds like the silicone is what's going to make the cage-like structure a little bit more solid or less likely to break down. Is that what's happening there?
It's just the ratio of it. So there's a German researcher Carl Hecht, who's done a lot of research on the zeolite, and he done all the research, and just he's saying it's all about the structure. The higher, the better. But it's just, even if you have a clinoptilolite that's a 4-to-1 ratio, it should still be stable unless you've got some super abnormal amount of stomach acid being produced or something like that. But it's always better to have a higher ratio. And I've also, supposedly it makes it more effective as well, which would line up with our results. So it's just different. It's just one of those things where the zeolite products really are different. You can't just say, oh, I found some clinoptilolite zeolite powder, this is going to work just as good as everything else. Like, there's so many factors to consider, and that's why it's not something that you just go pick up, like really cheap stuff and assume it's going to work. Because the processing, zeolite itself is cheap. The advanced processing and manufacturing is what's expensive. So if you have a zeolite powder that's really cheap, there's probably a reason for it, because it hasn't gone through the advanced processing, which is quite expensive.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And as far as other brands, are they remineralizing at all after they're doing the cleaning process, or are you guys the only ones doing that?
I mean, everyone claims they are. It's hard to say. I mean, you've got, well, a lot of them aren't even, most of them are not cleaning. So at least they still have some minerals there, which a lot of times there's still going to be more benefit than harm. That's the thing. So you could take a product, it's just, do you want good or do you want the best? And if you're talking about high doses over time, you definitely don't want to be taking something like that, even if it has short-term benefit, like a charcoal or bentonite clay. I mean, hard to say because everyone's got a proprietary cleaning process. So how do you know? And same with us, right? I mean, ours. So the thing with ours is I didn't develop this stuff myself, right? This cleaning process. I'd worked on the particle size and all this, but I actually partnered up with the guy who first released a zeolite product to the US market. So he's like the father of zeolite, right? There was two guys, one in Europe, one in the US. I partnered with the guy from 25 years who developed the zeolite industry. So he has things really well figured out in terms of the manufacturing process and the cleaning process. So he's got actually does have a proprietary cleaning process that no one else is using. That's what we're using. And I don't even know what it is. He won't even tell me. That's the thing, right? But I don't care because I've got the third-party testing and the analysis and all this stuff. I know it works. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. It's not like I'm just going to a mine somewhere, grabbing this stuff and, throwing it in doing something to it. Like, this is like this has been a process around for 25 years that's been perfected. Millions of dollars have been put into it. That's why I partnered with them, because I figure if I'm not going to be able to do it the best, I'm going to let someone else do it. I'm going to do what I can do the best and let everyone else do their part. So he has that process. I'm utilizing his process, and then I'm optimizing the particle size arrangement for what I see is the most effective, and then providing the education on it. So it is different. ZeoCharge is in no way private labeled. There's no one else selling it for sure. It's our proprietary product, but it's his cleaning process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive back into your thoughts around detoxing the brain with zeolite.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So and that's really kind of the claim to fame with the liquids, is that they're small enough to leave the gut, enter the bloodstream, and potentially enter the brain. Now, I've seen no evidence of any of that from any zeolite supplement anywhere. So, and first, let me say, back to the aluminum toxicity issue, there are a number of practitioners who claim through muscle testing and through other testing that the nano zeolites have caused some issues with aluminum in the brain. So, I mean, I don't know. That's why we don't want the super nano stuff, because there hasn't been any research on it. So we don't want anything that small, and we just don't find it necessary, because maybe it gets to a point where it's so small. They're not even really zeolite cages at that point. They're zeolite, clinoptilolite fragments that they market them as. So like they're just bits and, so anyway, that's another issue. But in terms of getting to where they're claiming it's getting, when you consider just the digestive process, when you take a liquid zeolite product, unless it's liposomal, which there's a couple, but let's put that aside for a second. You take a normal liquid zeolite, nano zeolite supplement, and they're saying this is going to get to your brain and detox and all this stuff. Okay, you have this very, very tiny amount of zeolite that you're spraying in your mouth. It's going through the digestive process, right? Through your esophagus, it's entering your stomach, and then it goes to your small intestine, and that's where it's absorbed into your bloodstream. Because when it's things that are large particle sizes will pass on to your large intestine, out the body. but the smaller particle sizes at that point will go through the small intestine or gut lining into the bloodstream for a full body detox. So, in order for a nanozeolite to make it to that point, you're assuming that all of the zeolite cages haven't been used up during the digestive process, right? And it's such a low dose, you've almost certainly used them all up. So it's very unlikely a nanozeolite is ever going to even make it to the bloodstream. And even if it does, how would it ever make it to the brain? Because then it would have to go through the entire bloodstream without picking anything up. So there's all sorts of issues. Unless it picks something up in the gut, carries it through the intestinal lining to the bloodstream, carries that to the brain. I don't know. It's just the whole concept of it is there's some missing links and missing pieces to it besides just maybe being too small. But the process of zeolite to get to the brain, it's not like it just shows up in your brain. It has to go through the digestive process, right?
One thing about the liquid, I was doing a protocol. I won't say whose it was or whatever, but some years back when I first was sick and was thinking that I had heavy metals and mold and everything, and you would have to take the liquid like 3 times a day because they said because of the half-life, and then you would have to take the binder like an hour before bed, the charcoal, the activated charcoal. I think it had like some pectin and some other things in there as well. Seemed like a pretty like advanced charcoal. It was better than just like the cheap activated charcoal stuff. It was like 50 or $60 a bottle, so it had some other things in it. But for yours, you're just kind of like take it once a day and it's fine. So I'm like, that makes more sense to me, like as far as the zeolite itself doing its job in comparison to you telling me that I need to take something 3 times a day because of the half-life. And then also I need another binder to make sure that it doesn't let go of whatever that it's holding on to. It kind of made me wonder after a while, like, is the zeolite, this liquid zeolite, doing its job in general?
Right. Yeah. So, and I know the product that you were taking, and it was back to the clinoptilolite fragments, right?
Hmm.
So and if they're so small, one, the thing about zeolite is not only can it trap things in its cage, which is the most efficient way to detox, but it can adsorb, meaning it can attach things to its surface. So when you're looking at the clinoptilolite fragments and some of the smaller zeolites, it's probably not trapping things in its cage, but it can still kind of attach them like a magnet to its surface. But at that point, it's going to be much more likely to drop them. So if you have something that's, let's just say 1 nanometer, and you come across a toxin that's 50 nanometers, maybe it snags it, like it kind of pulls it, but then it immediately drops it because it can't hold on to it because it's too heavy. So that's where a lot of times you're getting all these terrible detox reactions, and that's where the other binder would be necessary to kind of mop up the mess that was made by the liquid zeolite. So that's one possibility of what's happening. Another thing, back to the brain, I don't think we really want zeolite in the brain, if we're being completely honest, right? So a lot of people like you. The key is you don't need zeolite or anything else to go into the brain to detox the brain. The most effective way to detox the brain, kind of like you were saying through HTMA and things, mineral balancing, is to get your body to naturally release them through the natural lymphatic system and detox systems of the body. That's really, in general, the most effective way to, that is the only way to effectively detox. Chelating, binding, all these other methods are ways to encourage your body to get to that point, but there's definitely a limitation when it comes to even zeolite and chelators if you're relying solely on the fact that they go in and grab things. The key is to get your body to naturally release. So ZeoCharge, I don't think it's making it to the brain. A lot of people think it does. I don't know. I don't think it is. And I don't care if it is or not. I know it's detoxing the full body, right? So that's kind of how it works. So, yeah, I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me, Clark speaks pretty eloquently about how the blood-brain barrier was actually invented to regulate minerals within the brain. So I'm totally fine with doing like the mineral protocol based on my HTMA. And I think minerals are great in your brain. They're needed for neurochemistry and, different neurotransmitters and psychology. And that's totally fine, natural substance. But do we really want some substance that's generally not there, like a zeolite or anything else, just because we have technology to turn it into some tiny particle and just only for the sole fact that it can pass the blood brain barrier. But then what if it's in there, like you said, just being that weak binder and just stirring stuff around? And that's what I felt like when I was taking it. Honestly, I was like, I don't know if this stuff, like I just felt terrible when I was doing that zeolite, and I was doing the 3 times a day, which is annoying. And then doing the, make sure you have your binder at night away from food and all of that. And it's like, I almost think that I potentially could have made it worse, because it's like, what if the metal that I did grab or whatever toxin was, in my kidney or something, but now it's in my brain because it like wiggled it out of an organ, but now it released it into the bloodstream, and mercury or whatever has more of an affinity for the brain tissue. Like, what if you're just redistributing a lot of that stuff and it's even making more chaos and making it worse?
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I would say if you're experiencing negative detox reactions when you're taking a chelator, a binder, a zeolite, or anything like that, a homeopathic even, you really want to stop and consider what's happening in your body, because there's a strong possibility that you're doing more harm than good. So when there's a lot of people who are against chelators, binders, and zeolite, and I'm almost with them, even though I have a zeolite company, right? But it has to be used properly, and you have to know what you're doing. So the general thought when you're doing some sort of detox protocol like that with a chelator or a zeolite or binder, whatever, and you're experiencing these terrible reactions, people are like, oh, that's good. It's a healing crisis. It's a detox reaction. It means the product's working. But in reality, in my opinion, it means the product is working against your body and not with it. Because like you're saying, it's stirring stuff up. Because when you're experiencing these symptoms, that's a warning sign from your body that your body can't handle the current toxic load in circulation, what's floating, what you're exposed to. So I think what happens is there's a threshold of the amount of toxicity your body. Do you want me to talk about that 3-level theory I've mentioned before?
That was one of my questions, so you can
Yeah.
if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, and this has really helped me understand how the body detoxes and processes things. So I think you've got 3 levels of kind of toxin storage in the body. Level 1 is going to be just kind of general, like we'll call it exposure, whether that's circulating in the bloodstream or in the gut, just what's exposed. I usually just call that circulation, but it's the gut and everything else as well. What your body's exposed to. And then you've got level 2, which is a general storage, kind of tissue level. And then you've got level 3, which is what I call deep storage, which is going to be a lot of times the deeply stored stuff in organs. So let's, for example, just go through the process. Let's say I eat a bunch of shark meat or something, I'm eating shark or something. Okay. It's the first thing I could think of. So I'm eating shark, very high in mercury, right? And let's say I just go to town on this stuff and I'm eating like 5-6 pounds of it a day. Okay. So I'm getting an increased level of mercury coming into my body. Now, the key really is, can my body keep up with the amount of toxicity coming in? So if my detox pathways, the better my detox pathways and the healthier I am, the more I'm naturally going to be able to eliminate. So just a little bit every single day, like a tiny bit of mercury from, a tiny piece of fish or something, maybe my body can handle. But if I have an exposure where I take all this shark, all this mercury, it's an overload in my system. So basically the threshold of what's circulating just crossed the stress threshold. So now either I'm getting symptoms from it because my body is kind of freaking out, doesn't know what to happen. And then whatever my body can't get out immediately, it has to do something with, because it doesn't want it all floating around because it's exposed to the systems of the body. The immune system's attacking this. This is resulting in oxidative stress, inflammation, and all these other things. So whatever the body can't get out, it has to do something with. And I think it puts it into level 2, which is this general storage area. So kind of just general tissue, kind of surface area tissue. And I think ideally what happens from there is after things calm down in level 1, circulation and exposure, the body takes level 2, puts it back into level 1 and gets rid of it because it doesn't really want it. But let's say level 1 is high because your daily exposure is still high, or you have some other stressors and your body's not focusing on detox. And then level 2 starts filling up, this storage bin. Now the body has to do something, has to find a new spot for the mercury. And this is where it goes to level 3, I think, which is kind of the deeply stored area. And I think when it gets to the deeply stored area, like deeply in organs, is where it becomes very difficult to release because it can be stressful on the way out. So I think the key is not only to go in and grab, I think what happens when you're getting a detox reaction is you go in and either one, you're just storing stuff up in level 1 and it's just kind of irritating everything and you're getting all these symptoms, and then they redistribute and you think you've detoxed. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. And that could involve more than mercury. It could involve the candida, yeast, parasites, microbes that are attached to the metals, and you've just irritated everything and you're getting symptoms. That's one possibility. The next possibility is you've gone in and you've grabbed a metal from level 2, general tissue, or you've pushed that into level 1, and now your threshold of how much you can handle in exposure has just been exceeded because you're already at your max capacity in level 1. You've added more from level 2. Now your body starts freaking out. You're getting these symptoms. So the traditional practitioner says this is a great thing. It means that the detox protocol is working, which is true to some extent. But what your body is telling you is you've got too much toxicity in level 1 for you to handle. And if you're getting those symptoms, there's a very good chance that a lot of that toxicity is going to redistribute. So either going back to level 2 or making its way to level 3, whatever it is, even if some of it goes out. So if you can detox without the reactions, that's ideal. Now maybe you get them for a few days, but if you're on these chelators for weeks and you're getting reactions the whole time, really not ideal, because it's really causing a stressful experience. And I believe at that point you're really limited in what you're detoxing, because even if you're grabbing onto level 1, maybe level 2, there's no way your body's going to let go of level 3 toxicity because your body's in such a state of stress. And that's one of the things I learned from the case studies program, is it's less about the chelator or the supplement, and it's more about your body's natural ability to release the toxicity. And in order for it to do so, it has to be comfortable. The healthier you are, the more likely you are to do that. So one of the first steps to detox is getting healthy, right? So in a healthy person, they're naturally detoxing better every single day. In someone that has a chronic illness, all the toxicity that they're being exposed to from the food, water, air, whatever else, their body is not prioritizing because it's focusing on infections. It's focusing on emotional, mental stress. It's focusing on other things, and it's using up what I call detox energy. Or it doesn't have as much detox energy to focus on the toxicity, and the body says, you know what? We have to prioritize the infections. We have to prioritize the stress. But what we can do with the metal and the other toxicants is we can store them in fat, because the body has a natural storage unit for them. So I think that's why people become so toxic over time. A lot of times, pretty much any time you have Lyme disease or a chronic illness and you get tested for heavy metals, they're high. And then naturally people are like, oh, there's the problem. It's the heavy metals. Now, I think at that point they're probably contributing to the problem, but I think the main reason they are there is because of another underlying problem where your body stopped prioritizing detox and started jamming all of your daily exposure into fat, and your natural detox process is shut down or slowed down as a defense mechanism because your body's more focused on the short-term survival over long-term thrival. So that's really the thing. I mean, from your body's perspective, if it's got all this toxicity, it's trying to move things from level 3 to level 2 to level 1. It's constantly causing a little bit of stress on your body, because when you have something like mercury floating around, it's toxic and your immune system's going to attack it. That's going to result in an inflammatory process, all sorts of issues. And if you've got all sorts of other things going on and you're at your threshold of total stress, like your bucket's filled up, like some functional docs talk about, then your body's not going to let go of the metals and other toxic elements from deep storage. So sometimes you have to clear some of the other stuff as well. So that's where I see an issue with some of the chelators and zeolite and binders and homeopathics, is that people think that they take them and they're just going to be able to grab everything. Usually not the case. It's up to the body. Your cells bond to mercury is stronger than any chelator known to man. That's it. Like there's the OSR. Do you want me to talk about the OSR?
Yeah, you can.
All right.
Let people know what it is if they've never heard of it too.
Yeah, so this is just a good example of the limitation of something. And it's not even that they're not good products. It's just that it's up to the body. Detox is 100% up to the body. So the best way to detox is to follow a protocol that's encouraging your body to naturally dump metals and get them out safely. And that can be done through a number of mechanisms, but a lot of times direct chelation is not the best method. So I think that's where a lot of the people that are against chelators and binders, that's their philosophy, which I think is 100% accurate. It's just that I found that proper use of ZeoCharge is able to do an incredible job in detoxing, whereas most things can't. But OSR is the strongest known chelator, synthetic chelator, developed by an individual named Boyd Haley. He was a professor at University of Kentucky conducting research on Alzheimer's. And he came across, just startling information on the connection between mercury and Alzheimer's, and how Alzheimer's never even really existed until the early 1900s. And they can tell because it's not based on any scientific testing. When you have Alzheimer's, your brain is shrunken. So they've been doing, brain autopsies for years, hundreds of years, and they never saw the phenomena of a shrunken brain until the 1900s. And then he's looking into mercury fillings, the silver amalgam fillings, which are 50% mercury. And he's discovering that, they started putting these in people's mouths in the 1840s. And the first generation of people that died in the early 1900s, all of a sudden have Alzheimer's, are starting, right? And now look, everyone's got the mercury fillings. Anyway, he discovered all sorts of alarming facts, how mercury can contribute or cause Alzheimer's. And he said, all right, this is good information. How do we get the mercury out of your brain? So and this is just a conventional guy, right? He's a biochemist. So he's like looking around and he's like, there's nothing to do it, in his opinion, because he's looking at EDTA, DMSA, DMPS, other synthetic chelators. And he says none of these are really designed for mercury, and they have weak bonds. He calls them complexing agents because they go in, they bind to these metals, and they're generally only binding to circulating metals anyway, not even getting to the tissue. And he says they end up dropping them, and it's just terrible. So he says we need to do something. He actually invented his own chelator, right, based on this research. And this was where OSR came in. And this was back in, I think, 2006 or so. He developed this compound called OSR, which stands for oxidative stress relief. He was selling it as a nutritional supplement. And it later got shut down. It's been in trials to be a drug for about 15 years now. But what it is, it's a mercury chelator that's designed specifically to go into fatty tissues like your brain. So it's hydrophobic, meaning it's afraid of water. So this thing will go straight into the body, go to your lungs, go to your liver, go to your kidneys, go to your brain, and bind specifically to mercury with such a tight bond that it will never let go. And now they have so much research on it, it's honestly quite incredible. They can combine OSR, and it's a different name, but I'll call it OSR. They combine OSR with mercury at high doses. They then feed that compound to animals. It doesn't even hurt them. So it's generated a completely new compound. This is how strong the bond is. Once it's bound to mercury, it will never let go. So you don't have to worry about the dropping issues or any of that stuff. So the point is, one, strongest chelator ever developed. And they did all the animal research, incredibly promising. It removed all the mercury from the brain, from the organs, from the body. And then there's plenty of human research too, but it's all done in coal miners. So the problem now is that there's a lot of people taking this chelator and they're like, this is incredible. This is going to remove all of the mercury from my body in 2 weeks, because that's kind of what the research indicates. That is not happening. I can tell you that for sure. And what we have to consider, and the point that I'm going to be making is that your cell's bond to mercury is stronger than the bond to OSR to mercury. And if OSR is not able to remove mercury from your cells, nothing will be able to through direct chelation. It has to be your body to let go. So the limitation to a lot of the studies when it comes to chelation, and a lot of studies in general, is that they're done on relatively healthy people or people with acute mercury toxicity. So in the studies, they'll take these animals, they'll inject them with mercury. They've got incredibly high level, lethal doses of mercury in the brain and other areas. They'll give them the OSR and it goes in and removes it all, and they're perfectly healthy. And in humans, the coal miners, same thing. It's acute exposure because they're coal miners. They have high circulating levels of mercury, but they don't have chronic accumulation. The body is going to respond differently if you have a chronic illness than if you're healthy. So if you're perfectly healthy and you were just exposed to mercury, OSR is probably the best thing. It's going to go in, grab it, you're good. But when you have a chronic illness, your body is afraid to let go of the metal, because it's afraid of what's going to happen on the way out, so it holds on tightly. Back to the body's focus is short-term survival, because the body says, you know what? I can survive with Alzheimer's. but I can't handle this mercury floating around right now. So it would prefer to keep the mercury in the brain, in the kidneys, in the liver, deteriorating cells in those organs, opposed to having it floating around. Because when it's in level one, it's exposed to the systems of the body where it's causing strong immune reactions, strong inflammatory processes. But when it's tucked away in storage, it's only deteriorating the storage bin that it's in. So that's what I found. And I did an interview with an OSR group where there's like hundreds or thousands of people taking this stuff, and it's just not detoxing them. And it's not because it's not a great product, it's because chelation won't work for them, because if their body doesn't want to let go, it's not going to let go. And the interesting thing is, a lot of these people notice that they have this pulling effect on their brain. So they'll take the OSR and then they'll feel, most of them just feel absolutely terrible and it's a disaster. But one of the symptoms some of them feel is that there's like a tug of war game going on in their brain. And I think probably what's happening is the OSR is in the brain, because that's what it's designed to do, and it's trying to rip out the mercury. And it's like tug of war between the OSR and your brain cells. It's crazy. Like, if your body doesn't want to let go of something, you shouldn't be trying to rip it out, for one. If you fight against your body, you're going to lose every time. Right? So that's kind of the issue. So in someone with a complex illness, sometimes the priority is not detox of metals right away, right? Sometimes the priority is dealing with mental, emotional stress, microbial issues, other things to lower your total stress burden so your body is in a better position to detox. So chelation in general, I found to be very limited. And I will say that I used to think OSR was the greatest thing. I had my family on it. I had myself on it. I had lots of people taking it. And then when I gained access to the OligoScan and started realizing that it wasn't detoxing mercury, first I was stunned and very disappointed. But then I realized that the ZeoCharge was doing a better job of removing mercury than OSR. That changed my entire philosophy. And it's because ZeoCharge is less about direct binding and going into organs and grabbing stuff, and more about a general reducing the total toxic burden in circulation so that your body can naturally start releasing these other toxic elements from storage. It's calming the storm in the body to get to the body to the point where its natural detox functions optimized properly. And I think that's the only way to detox, is something that works with your body and not against it. So to end this long rant, where I think I started was about detox reactions. If you're experiencing a detox reaction, there is stress occurring on your body. And if you're having a detox reaction from a chelator or a zeolite or a binder, it means there's probably redistribution. There's something occurring that's a stressful experience, and that's going to result in the body being less willing to let go. It's going to be in survival mode. So it's going to be less willing to let go of these heavy metals from your brain and your organs and etc. So if you are taking a zeolite, including my zeolite product, ZeoCharge, and you're having terrible reactions, I would say that's not ideal. You want to figure out what's going on and either adjust the dose, which we'll get into, or stop taking it.
Yeah, beautifully said. It's crazy the out of all of the downstream effects that all of the heavy metals have. It seems, I don't know if you agree with this, that the mercury is the toughest one, right? And that's been for me for sure. Most of the mercury coming out, I had the severe headaches. Like I think that if once the mercury's in the brain, like you might be able to calm down a lot of the detox reactions with like the higher dose of the zeolite, but with the mineral balancing, I think it pushes it out a little bit more forceful than what the ZeoCharge does, which I'm okay with. But you definitely have to be pretty diligent around opening the organs of elimination like daily. Basically, like I'm doing 2 coffee enemas back to back. Like I'm in the sauna, I'm on the PEMF mat, getting the red light on my liver and my stomach. So there's things that you basically have to do that are more time consuming than just taking the ZeoCharge if you want to go the route of the mineral balancing, for sure, because it's crazy. The mercury in the brain, I knew it, and when that was coming out, on the one test where it was like the highest, I was like, felt like I was dying, but I was passing parasites, that was actually, for me, I was like, yo, I think I'm moving in the right direction. At least, like, I'm not doing any parasite cleansing. I'm just doing the mineral balancing and the ZeoCharge, and they're just coming out on their own. So I was happy to at least see that and feel like I was making progress. And I was just getting better as far as like gut function as well. I was just really tired and wanted to take naps and kind of sleep. overall. But with just the ZeoCharge, that's more gentle. That might be more appealing to some people if they don't want to be a warrior like me and dive in the trenches of doing 2 coffee enemas a day and doing all the biohacks and the ozone and, feeling like crap. But, I'm built a little bit different for sure. But it does seem that mercury, especially when you have that, which kind of sucks because a lot of people have it due to the amalgam fillings. And that's just something that they have, none of us had any idea. We just went to the dentist. I used to drink a bunch of soda and then, I had like 8 fillings and those go right into the brain. And then, I'm trying to rip those out 15, 20 years later. And it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. Mercury is the number one in terms of metals. Mercury is by far my number one concern. And I think a lot of times it's the mercury toxicity that results in the other metals accumulating. Because if you're perfectly healthy, all the metals that are coming in, you're getting rid of on a daily basis. But when you're not, and a lot of times it's from the mercury, everything else just starts accumulating. And then you end up with high levels. You very rarely see high levels of just one metal. It's usually all of them. It's because it's not a metal issue, it's a metal issue, but it's a detox function issue. And the metals, and the problem with the metals is they kind of bypass level 1, 2, 3. It goes straight to the mercury, it goes straight to level 3. Because you've got this stuff in your teeth, which is next to your brain. The vapor goes to the fat right in your brain. So that's why a lot of people actually that have them won't even get chronically ill. They just start having neurological decline because it's not causing a lot of the inflammatory processes systemically from the full body, and it's not resulting in an immune system reaction like it would be if it was being detoxed, but it just stays in the brain, and you're usually okay. A lot of people are okay until they hit 56, all of a sudden their brain stops working. And you've got almost, I don't know what percentage, but an incredible amount of percentage of people with Alzheimer's and neurological decline. And very few people are looking into the accumulation of mercury in the brain as one of the primary drivers of that. So, and I do see on my testing as well that the mercury is generally the hardest thing to remove. It's not uncommon for me to see people removing every other metal, but mercury lagging behind because the body just doesn't want to do it. Because yeah, I would definitely say it's the most toxic.
It seems like once you're releasing it, it's just the most disruptive, right? The body just throws out all the warning signs as soon as the mercury's released, especially with its infinity for the brain. It's just right there in the HPA axis where it's your control center of the brain, and then you want to just start moving everything around. It's tough to get through that without any detox symptoms at all. But, if you didn't have the metal fillings and, but I feel like mercury, especially with talking to Clark, like he talks about how mercury was used for like decades in high fructose corn syrup. It's in a lot of the soils just from the power plants that aren't scrubbed, like in China and stuff, and then that stuff ends up in the rainfall and rains down in different parts of the world, not just in China and in India. That stuff ends up in just the whole ecosystem, and so we're just kind of. Especially if you live in a big city like me, that's another reason why I like the ZeoCharge on top of the mineral balancing, because I still feel like living in Tampa. I'm not out in the, in the boonies like you. I'm in the thick of it. I'm driving in traffic, I'm right in the heart of the city, and I know for sure I'm still getting a daily dose just from the environment. And so I like to use the mineral balancing to release the deeply stored toxins, but also mop some of that up with the ZeoCharge and also be, cognizant of the daily exposures. Even though I have shower filter, even though I have water filter, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how just ubiquitous it is in food, just in air. I mean, they're coming at you from every which way. And if we don't find solutions like ZeoCharge or something better down the road, like we're going to need something to just be healthy in the 21st century.
Yeah. I think I have two things to say. One, and I'm not the person that's going to come out and say every single person needs to take zeolite or you're going to die. It's the only thing. It's like, it's the only thing you need to take. It's going to detox every single toxic thing out of your body in a month. Like I understand how things work. I like to consider it a foundation, right? I take other stuff. I do other biohacking tech. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but I consider ZeoCharge as a foundation to your protocol. So whether that be an HTMA mineral balancing protocol, whether that be an antimicrobial protocol, whether that be a weight loss protocol. It's just a really nice support system as a foundation to help mop up a lot of the toxic elements that are just flying out all over the place when you're doing these protocols. Right. And when it comes to daily dose of toxicity, I like to say there's kind of two classification or and like a two-level detox where you've got level one, which is your daily dose, and level like that's what you're exposed to every day, and then you've got the next level you want to detox, which is the stored stuff, levels 2 and 3, right? So when it comes to daily dose, though, people think it's all food, water, air, cosmetic products, all of these things we're exposed to, but I would say the majority of your daily dose of toxins is going to be from internally produced toxicity, things like metabolic waste products and microbial waste products, especially if your body's not functioning properly. So, for example, ammonia is a metabolic waste product that we're all producing just from the digestive process. And if our liver's working properly and our just everything's working properly, no problem. It just is excreted. But if we've got liver dysfunction, we can get a buildup of ammonia, and it can actually travel to your brain, and it's neurotoxic. It's an incredibly toxic substance. And then the liver takes ammonia because it converts it to urea. But if your liver is not working, it doesn't convert it all, then you've got built up ammonia. If your kidneys aren't working properly, the urea goes to your kidneys and filters out. You get a buildup of urea. Both very toxic. Ammonia is way worse. The point is, ZeoCharge binds to both ammonia and urea. And there's other things as well, like the microbial waste products. Just if you've got the metals and other things, you've also got yeast overgrowth and parasites. They're just all there together because the terrain of your body is not going to be where it should be. If it's not going to be where it's going to be when you're a little healthier. So you're naturally going to have these microbes there for one reason or the other. And then they're releasing their waste products every day, which are also stressing out your system, including ammonia and other things. So the daily dose of toxins, I would say, if you're not healthy, even if you're living a perfectly clean environment and you're in the middle of nowhere in the woods, like I am here, no one can see that, I won't show them. Yeah, I'm in the woods here. The daily dose of toxins from your internal production is probably going to be more significant than the external exposure if your body's not working optimally. So taking something like ZeoCharge just to bind to those things can really calm the storm in the body. That's why I like to say it does. It calms the storm and then allows your body to focus more energy on other things, on going after the microbes, on detoxing the deeply stored stuff. So I think the key to ZeoCharge, the number one reason why it's so effective, is that it's binding these daily dose things and just calming the immune system down, calming the inflammatory process, and then your body can focus on everything else more, and the other protocols are going to work better.
Yeah, and I believe you even say people like histamine is another one, right? And like mast cell activation syndrome, like people who have high histamine from which I always think is like a gut issue and just an overall you shouldn't have to be on this low histamine diet forever, in my opinion. I did it for a while when I had mold and it did help, but that was such a restrictive diet and you're not supposed to eat leftovers and it's just super crazy. But I think I heard you talk about that even histamine can be mopped up with the ZeoCharge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I guess we never even talked about what it can bind to, really. So, it binds to, heavy metals, and we can prove it removes all 15 heavy metals that we tested it for. It binds to mycotoxins, and that's one of the people that have mycotoxin illness. A lot of times they feel the best right away because it's just binding to those mycotoxins that are stressing out the immune system, and it calms things down right away. It binds to ammonia, urea, some of these metabolic waste products. It binds to glyphosate. It binds to radioactive materials like
Wow.
strontium, cesium. They actually use zeolite. They've used it commercially in nuclear disasters. So like the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, they dumped tons of zeolite down just in the environment to clean up the water supply and just clean up the environment. So it's used for for radiation. It's used for excess histamine is a good one. So a lot of people that have mast cell activation syndrome, mold toxicity, something Lyme disease, where they have excess histamine, get a lot of relief from it as well. And then free radicals is another one, and that's an interesting one because it's a very unique antioxidant, right? Because traditionally you take an antioxidant, it goes in like a vitamin C or something, scavenges the free radical, neutralizes it, right? Donates an electron, whatever. Zeolite can actually trap the free radicals in its cage. So it can completely unique, but also it can reduce the formation of free radical production by removing some of the toxic elements like the heavy metals that are causing excess free radicals. And then it optimizes your total antioxidant production, because there's actually studies were in chickens, but the studies showed that when the chickens were fed the clinoptilolite zeolite, it raised their glutathione peroxidase and superoxide dismutase, enabling them to better handle stress. So I think in terms of oxidative stress, the ZeoCharge can be incredibly effective. One, binding to free radicals. Two, remove, just all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's a broad spectrum binder. There's probably a lot of other things it binds to that we don't even know about. I mean, we know it binds to like nitrates and things like that too. But I think what it binds to is one, it's the direct binding effect, and then it's got the indirect detox effect. And that's the key, because just if you've got, let's say, 100 different toxic elements in your body, let's say the ZeoCharge binds to 60 of them, and that puts your body in a position where it says, all right, now we've got this extra room, we've got more detox energy, the body dumps the other 40, and the natural systems of the body can handle it. So even if it's not able to bind to everything, it binds to enough stuff where the body can kind of finish the job on its own. So it's really interesting, and we see that in the case studies where one, it's able to remove all 15 metals, whether it's directly binding to all 15 or it's a natural release, I'm not sure, but it's doing something. And these are from the tissue, remember. This is not just circulating. So this is a full body tissue detox. It's also able to reduce fluoride. And there's no direct binding capacity for a zeolite to fluoride, which is on the halogen group, right? But it's still able to reduce fluorine levels on our test. And there's also research showing it protects against fluoride toxicity in animals. But it's an indirect effect, one way or the other, right? I think what happens is once you open up the detox pathways, the body indiscriminately starts dumping all these toxic elements at once. So it's super interesting. And I did mention ZeoCharge as a foundation, but what I was surprised to see during the case studies and even since with people taking it is that a lot of people are only taking ZeoCharge on its own, and it's doing an incredible job detoxing all the metals, even without any support, which honestly surprised me. Because before the case studies, I said, you know what, it's probably not going to be that effective for Mercury. We're going to need the OSR. We're going to need something else. But now I'm looking and I'm saying, this is actually doing a better job than all the other stuff that people have tried, especially the chelators and the binders and even the homeopathics and stuff, just because they're such stressful experiences that a lot of times, while they think they're detoxing, they might only be on a level 1 or 2 detox, but not getting to the deeply stored stuff. And through our testing, which we'll talk about if you want the OligoScan, we're seeing that just from the ZeoCharge, people are getting to a deep level 3, tissue and organ level mercury detox from ZeoCharge alone. And that's honestly surprised me. So a lot of people are just taking ZeoCharge because some people are so sensitive, and these would be what doctors would consider the too sick to detox individuals, which is probably true. They probably potentially are too sick to detox right now because it's just too stressful. Almost all of them have been able to take the ZeoCharge, if taken properly, and tolerate it while detoxing. And that's been incredible. So some of the people that have tried a lot of other methods and just, they couldn't continue because of just severe reactions, even if it was helping, they've been able to take the ZeoCharge at very high doses and detox without the terrible symptoms. So that's one of the main classifications of people who take it, is people who are very, very sensitive, who have failed with other products. Like if you've taken a liquid zeolite and it was a disaster, like a lot of those people switch over and take ZeoCharge at a high dose, like 100,000 times the dose as the liquid, and they get no symptoms at all. But then we're doing a sip challenge right now, actually. So what's happening is people, with the sip challenge, you take 2 scoops of ZeoCharge, 10 grams, mix it in a glass of water, and for the first 3 days, you just take 1 sip. And then the next 3 days, you take the full glass. But what's been happening with people is they just take a sip of ZeoCharge and it causes incredibly terrible symptoms. Just like with their other protocols, or if they were taking a liquid. But then they drink the full glass, they get no symptoms. And it's not that the low dose is working better, it's that it's working inefficiently and they need more zeolite to offer an efficient detox. So super interesting stuff there. It's all dose dependent.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. Let's get into that higher dose theory you have, if anyone wants to dig super deep into this, you have actually a couple of videos. You have a shorter one on YouTube I've seen, and then you have like a longer, more scientific, in-depth one on the Zeolite Labs website. Anybody can check either of those resources out. But how did you stumble upon the higher dose theory? Was there any science, or you just started taking more?
Yeah, no, I'm the originator. I mean, most it's actually being adopted now. But at first, everyone's like, "You're just trying to sell more product, and this is stupid. You're stupid," the normal stuff. But now they're like, now you see the other companies on their email list like promoting it, taking
Mm.
stuff like literally taking quotes straight from my website, putting it on their stuff. And anyway, you know how it goes with that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, just starting off because initially I had purchased a liquid zeolite product, actually the same one that you took, and and then I started looking into it. I was like, okay, maybe this is not ideal. But then with the powders I was taking originally too, I had a bunch of clients taking it, and a lot of them were just they were getting symptoms. I mean, the liquids for sure, most people were getting symptoms. These are sensitive individuals, right? The average person takes any of this stuff, they feel nothing, right? But
Hmm.
like the very sensitive people, they're taking the liquids, usually cause terrible reactions. They take the powders, they were better, but still getting mild reactions. And I just started experimenting because I had the history of just my research in therapeutic dosing for the polysaccharides, right? So that's kind of what got me really interested in dosing because
Mega
I
dose
knew
of
it was all about
nutraceuticals.
right. And and that's exactly right. Put it on the maybe I should get the sign back, put it on the car again. People are like, "What?" Now my car has a bumper sticker that says the Great Daymobile, so that's a little better.
Okay.
But anyway, so
Uh,
I already had kind of the history of of dosing, and I said, "All right, let's see what happens here," and started putting a few people like myself on a high, and I didn't have symptoms to begin with, but it still did it. But I put people on the higher dose, and next thing you know, no symptoms. And then I starting everyone on a much higher dose. No one was getting symptoms. Then I had them try lower doses, and they got symptoms. So I said, okay, there's something to it. And this was years ago. So that's kind of where it started. And then I just started recommending higher doses. And the higher the dose I recommended, the better results people got. And it got to the point where very few people were even having the detox reactions. And initially I said, okay, let's do it 3 times a day, kind of with that same theory of, it's in the body for 8 hours and you need it constantly. And I was doing, a couple scoops or 2 teaspoons or something 3 times a day. But then I switched to taking it all at once with people, and the results were way better. So and it was efficient. It was working. It's not like it wasn't detoxing them. So that's what I'm recommending now is just the one single higher dose per day. But the higher the dose every time I increase the dose with people, they just get better results until there's a threshold where they don't get more results. But you don't overdose on it. That's why I like it. You can't do these types of experiments with chelators or other binders because it'll just be a disaster and tear up your body. But with zeolite, it's actually not only more effective, but it's less stressful on your body. And that's the key. Because when I started doing the testing, and this was years later, I started doing the testing, that I found that even people that had no symptoms, when they were taking a low dose, sometimes it was disturbing vitamin status and potentially causing some redistribution of metals, even if they felt nothing. But when we raised the dose, that reversed and they had improvement in everything. So that was like 4 or 5 years ago. I kind of come up with the theory, and then I just started playing around with it and discovered that yeah, we need to be on higher doses. And I mean, I have another product that I sold the first generation version before I developed ZeoCharge. I've sold like 100,000 bottles or like a ton of it, right? Lots of this stuff, and the people taking it, a lot of these people are incredibly sensitive. I mean, hundreds of these people tried the liquids, they tried other powders, and some of them were like in the ER and just terrible reactions. And I'm like, don't power through it. That's terrible advice. Like, don't do it with that kind of stuff with chelators because there's redistribution happening. If you're in the ER, like, stop taking it. Like, you got to be careful. And a lot of these people are not working with any sort of practitioner either because they're, fed up and money and all that. But anyway, and I tell these people, they have, some of these people have the product for like years. And they're like, I bought this 2 years ago, but I'm so scared to take it. And I'm like, take 12 teaspoons. And they're like, I will die. I'm like, well, if you think you're going to die, just don't ever take it. Like, I don't want you to take it. But after talking through, what happens is they'll take it, then they'll call me and be like, I can't even believe it. I feel amazing and I have no symptoms. And this happened over and over and over where I got to the point where I'm like, I'm pretty confident with this recommendation of taking a higher dose. it's still kind of scary sometimes because the people that I'm talking to are so sick and they're so scared. I don't have the placebo effect of working for me, right? It's working against me because everyone's skeptical and they're assuming it's not going to work. And the fact that it still works just shows you that it's kind of incredible. Now I tell you have to. That's why I wrote the theory because it explains the reasoning behind, at least why I think the higher dose is safer. But I want people to kind of read that or watch the video to understand it to some extent because you want to be informed before you do something like a high dose detox protocol. You want all the information you can get, and there are some caveats. For example, sometimes you take a super high dose, it results in a huge parasite dump, and that's going to cause more symptoms than a low dose. And then you've got a binding dose versus a detox dose, where sometimes you're taking, and this is what I see a lot, people with other like binders, they're taking what I call a binding dose, which can help them feel better, where they're binding to circulating toxins, your daily dose, but it's never getting to the deep level stuff. So with ZeoCharge, for example, and we've got case studies of this as well, some people were taking ZeoCharge for a couple of months and feeling incredible. Vitamins improved, minerals improved. The metals were reducing on the test, but they weren't dumping them out from the deep level. Then we raised the dose. So let's say they were on like two tablespoons or 2 scoops of ZeoCharge, and they were feeling better and getting improvement. Then we moved them to 4 tablespoons or 4 scoops. There's scoops now, but there was tablespoons during the case study, so I use those interchangeably. But they went to 4 scoops, and then they actually started feeling worse. So they got the headaches, some irritability, joint pain, and then we retested them the next month, and their vitamin status actually got worse. Minerals got worse, but now they were like their metals started skyrocketing, like dumping. So like initially they were on a binding dose, kind of sopping up level 1, 2 metals, and they were feeling better. But when they raised the dose, it was enough to get the body to dump. It was like the next level of the detox. So they had huge dumps in mercury and other metals, which did stress out the system for a little bit, right? And then we raised the dose again, and those symptoms went away. So it's like the low dose sometimes is okay, the high dose is okay, but the intermediary dose causes the most symptoms. It's all about what's happening in the body. So a lot of people from the case study came to me taking like 30, 40 different detox supplements, and I test there was no detox occurring with these people. Like level 2 and 3, they were binding, but it just, most of the stuff, it was just, they were on so many things that it was stressing out the body and the body wasn't naturally dumping. And obviously these people were pretty upset to see that. But the test doesn't lie, right? Like it's not me, it's the test. So anyway, back to the dosing. So yeah, it was by observation, and then I developed the theory to provide my thoughts on why it's happening. And I guess I'll explain it. I'm just talking around it. Basically, if you take a little bit, and my theory is that 10,000 milligrams of zeolite is less likely to cause a detox reaction than 10 milligrams. So it's not like taking a little bit more, it's taking a lot more. Because if you take a liquid, which has like 1 or 2 milligrams, and you just take two sprays instead of 3, it'll probably make you feel worse. Because you have to get to a threshold of the dose. So keep that in mind. The theory does not apply to liquid zeolites. It does not apply to a lot of zeolite products on the market because it's only been tested on ZeoCharge, plus my other one, right? And they're very unique because they've got the range of particle sizes and the cleanliness and the remineralization and all that. But with that, people that take just a pinch or a sip, you get a little bit of zeolite coming in, and I think it just stirs stuff up, right? It kind of makes a mess, but there's not enough extra zeolite to clean up that mess that was generated. So it's just not an efficient detox because it goes back to how zeolite works through the swap mechanism. So let's say the zeolite comes in, you've got 100 zeolite cages, let's say, and then it grabs onto, let's just say it grabs onto a bunch of mercury that's floating around. That's great. If it just leaves the body right away, you're good to go. But if it then comes across lead, it swaps the mercury for the lead. Now you've got this mercury that was dislodged from its resting place, and the zeolite has switched over to binding the lead. Now this mercury is floating around that your body has to deal with. So if you had extra zeolite cages available, you have basically these sideline zeolites ready to grab that mercury that was just dropped. But if you didn't have enough, that mercury redistributes and your body has to deal with it on its own. So that's kind of the concept. There's a way more to it than that. involving like biofilm disruption. I mean, you take a tiny bit of zeolite, it'll rip open some biofilms. And you expose your body to parasites, to microbes, to all sorts of toxic elements. But if you took a way higher dose of the ZeoCharge, you're going to have all that zeolite to bind to all that stuff that's released, or at least a significant amount of it. So there's a lot of reasons. If people really want to get into it, I just can't explain it here because it's like a 14-page theory on why. But basically a little bit stirs stuff up, it makes a mess, you take more, it's a more efficient detox. It's all about having enough available zeolite particles to grab onto everything currently floating around, and then anything that gets dumped into level 1 exposure during the process.
Yeah, cool. Well said. I'll link to the both of the higher dose videos if people want to watch the 30-minute one or the hour-long one. I'll just throw them in the show notes for anybody who wants to nerd out on that type of stuff and really dig into whether or not the higher dose stuff will be for them. And what is a good starting out recommended dose? Usually like 2 to 4 tablespoons. I think that's what you told me a while back. But and then basically if they are feeling some detox symptoms, maybe go from 2 to that 4 tablespoons, right?
Yeah, so really the general rule, this is the most important thing. Forget about everything I just said. This is more important. If you take ZeoCharge at whatever dose, if you experience a reaction, take more. Double it. So if you start with 2 scoops or 2 tablespoons and you experience a headache or something, the next day take 4. That's the rule. So whatever you start on, whether it be 1 through 6 scoops, double it the next day if you experience a reaction. So another thing that I want people to understand, because people say, oh, there's this binding dose versus detox dose. Let me start with the binding dose of 1 scoop so I don't start detoxing yet. That's probably not going to work either, because even 1 scoop or a little bit usually starts you at least detoxing to some extent. It'll disrupt the biofilms in level 1 detox and cause reactions, so that theory just doesn't work. I would always, if you're sensitive, I would always recommend starting really with at least 4 scoops per day. 6 would be better. Just depend. I mean, if you're really not concerned about it and you're pretty healthy and you just want to do a detox, you can start with whatever you want. But if you get a reaction, take more. If you're on that spectrum of mycotoxin illness, Lyme, microbial imbalance, metals, EMF sensitivity, I would say start with 4 to 6. Educate yourself on it first so you feel confident with it. But I would personally never recommend starting with less than 4 on that dose, right? Because you'd rather not get the symptoms. You don't want to start low and work your way up like everything else. That's a great strategy with most things, but with ZeoCharge, you want to start high and work your way down. Because the healthier you become, the less you're going to need. But the more circulating toxicity up front, the more just you need right away. So we actually developed what's called the Ultimate Zeolite Experience, which is a 20-pack of ZeoCharge, and it's designed to be taken over 5 months. And it's based on this concept. So what you do is you take 6 scoops per day for the first month. And remember, this is all at once. Don't split it up. That's the other thing. It's not a cumulative amount of scoops throughout the day. It's a once per day. Because the key is to get enough on each dose. That's really the key. That's why we recommend once a day primarily. So the key is, so with the program, you do 6 scoops every day for the first month. The next month, you do 5 scoops a day. The next month, 4 scoops a day. Then 3 scoops, then 2 scoops. So it's a 5-month program starting high, working your way down, because as you remove the layers of toxicity, you're going to need a little bit less. And then at that point, you can maintain, if you choose to do so, at the 1 scoop. That's kind of the key. There's 30 scoops per container, so just keep that in mind for your how many jars you're going to buy. If you're just doing 1 scoop a day, the jar is a month. But if you want to do 2 scoops, you need 2 jars per month. If you want 4 scoops, you need to do 4 jars for the month. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I would say generally most people do really well with between 2 and 4 starting off, and then they can adjust. So some people, if money's not an issue, just always take more. Like I take at least 6 scoops every night, and I've been doing that for years. Just because you're not going to overdose, it's not causing mineral depletions. It's not, the only thing to be concerned with is taking too low of a dose, because it's the redistribution of the toxic elements. That's the thing with zeolite as well. Although it's not directly binding to essential minerals, it can still cause a mineral disturbance through an indirect mechanism. So all these liquid zeolites, like, oh, it's not messing up your minerals and all that. It's almost always messing up your minerals, like because of the redistribution that's occurring. So that's what happens. If you're getting you take a little bit, it stirs stuff up. The metal redistributes and pushes out the lead and the cadmium, or the cadmium, or the lead and the cadmium push out the calcium and the zinc and all these other things, it's going to mess things up. So the low dose, and once again, check out the case studies page, the low doses are much more likely to cause mineral disturbances. We're taking super high doses, and we're talking, for reference, a lot of the liquids are like 2 milligrams per serving. A lot of them are actually less than a milligram, like 300 micrograms. If you take 6 scoops of ZeoCharge, that's 30,000 milligrams. That's exactly 100,000 times the dose as those liquids that have 300 micrograms. 100,000 times the dose. And what I'm telling you is that taking that liquid zeolite is about 1,000,000 times more likely to cause terrible reactions and stress on your body than the higher dose. And that's, I'm 100% certain of that, and I can prove it through the case studies. There's also a few looking at the liquids versus the powder. I've seen so many people take the liquids, and a lot of people have had good success, so I don't want to say they're completely terrible. But when the people that haven't had good success switch to the powder, not only do they not feel terrible, they feel better, and they're detoxing. So it's quite incredible. So yeah, I would say between 2 and 4 scoops per day starting off, and then you can work your way down, work your way up. If money's not an issue, just take more starting off at least. And then if it is, you could even start with 6 scoops. And if that works great, the next day, go to 5 scoops. And if that's good, the next day, go to 4, right? So you don't have to stay on it for the full month. Just work your way down. And then if you get a symptom, let's say in 1 scoop, then you know you need to go back to 2 scoops, right? So that's one way to do it. It's better to take more unless you're doing testing. If you're doing some advanced laboratory testing, you can potentially start on a little lower dose if you're not getting symptoms to monitor progress. But otherwise, you want to err on the side of a higher dose, just because even though it's an incredible product, if you're taking a low dose and it's not enough to get your body to dump out some of these metals, especially if you're not doing it in combination with like the HTMA balancing, mineral balancing, or something else, and it's your sole thing for detox, you just want more. So that's the other thing. A lot of people that are taking it are only taking it. They need higher doses because they're taking nothing else, because they can't tolerate anything else. But if you're taking a bunch of other like hopefully good stuff, then you might need less of it. So it just kind of depends if it's doing all the work for your body or if it's just a partner in crime with the other things.
Yeah, and I experienced it myself, even with the mineral balancing stuff. I went down all the way from 6 scoops into 5 to 4 to 3, and then I did 2 for a little bit, and then I was like, you know what, let me bump it back up to 3 and see if I feel a little bit better. And I did actually. So I'm back on 3 because I just feel like a little bit more energy, less brain fog when I do 3 instead of 2. So I think you should it's easy to just to play with it and just to go down and then say, oh, I'm kind of tired and I can't really focus. And then you go back up 1 to 3 or 4 or whatever, and then you feel a little bit better. Then that's kind of like your dose, at least for the moment. And the goal is to be able to go down in time if you do end up detoxing, or like you said, if money's not an issue, then whatever, just stay on 4. It doesn't seem to. Have you seen anybody that's like taking them high dose? I know yourself's been doing high doses for a long time, but any other clients experience any kind of symptoms or vitamin, mineral deficiency, anything from taking those high doses for long periods of time?
No, it's the only issue has been, and I've got a couple of good case studies I'm going to mention, but the only issue has been short term where someone's been on, let's say, 2 scoops and they're feeling incredible for the first month, but then like 30 days in, all of a sudden they start getting all these symptoms. And what's happening there is they've entered the next level of detox. So if that happens to you, then raise your dose once you start experiencing the symptoms. And then you can go back down. So that's one thing that's kind of interesting. It just goes back to if you ever experience any symptoms, just take more to a certain point. If you're on like 12 scoops and you're not feeling better, then it's probably something else, like a chronic parasitic infection or something that you might want to address at the same time, because sometimes you get massive, microbial dumps. But there's a couple people that have been taking. One of them's on ZeoCharge, one of them's on my other Zeolite product. They both started on the other one before ZeoCharge was available. And these were adult autistic cases, very severe. And the parents had purchased the Zeolite for them. And initially, my recommendation then was initially two tablespoons, starting off with once per day. And now I would recommend way more for those individuals, but I would say 6, but it was 2 then. And they both took 2 and felt way worse. Increased rage, increased irritability, terrible tantrums. I said, okay, try 4. They went to 4, terrible. They went to 6 tablespoons, and they both felt way better. So it was like 2 was made them way worse, 4 made them way worse. When they got to 6 tablespoons once per day, it actually their rage reduced to before lower than baseline, and they started feeling incredible. So and they've both been on it now for like 2.5, 3 years, and they've both been taking actually between 6 and they've been doing 6 tablespoons twice a day or more. Some of they doubled it temporarily. So the thing, and I never wanted them to be on it that long. I but I talked to the parents and they're like, we can't take them off because when we take them off of it, the rage comes back, the irritability comes back, and they feel worse. So they need incredibly high doses long term to manage just the complexity of everything going on. And I don't even know if it's really helping them in terms of detox. It's probably just binding to so many of the ammonia and the internally produced toxicity from a daily basis. That's probably what's helping. I have no idea. But one of them got tested recently, minerals, and no imbalances previous to like anything, like nothing has changed. There was low copper, but there was low copper before just because of the condition. But yeah, no,
Mm.
and with my case studies, and these aren't my, those are just customers, not clients. With my case studies, I had people on this stuff, very high doses. Um, and the concern is just the low dose, not the high. I mean, my mom, I've had her on very high, 12 tablespoon. And these are, 60 grams a day. These are high doses, no issues. And for my mom, actually, I had her on 2 tablespoons a day for 2 years, and she got almost no benefit from it. Not feeling better, not worse, but I was like, okay, we need to do this, right? She was also on OSR, and she had 14 amalgams removed during this process, and nothing really was happening. I double her dose, and I'm testing her with the device, the OligoScan, like no movement over a 7-month period. I've taken OSR, ZeoCharge, and that was ZeoCharge, 2 tablespoons. I double her dose to 4 tablespoons of ZeoCharge, take her off the OSR, so all she's taking is ZeoCharge, test her 30 days later, and I kid you not, it was the greatest improvement in a 30-day period I've ever seen. Her minerals completely like balanced in 30 days, her vitamins skyrocketed, and her mercury started dumping for the first time I've ever seen. So that shows you that she could have taken 2 tablespoons probably her entire life, and it would never have detoxed anything. She had to get to the 4 to get to the point where her body said, I'm confident to dump it out. And then she started actually experiencing like eyesight improvement and calming down of the central nervous system a few months later, like just maintaining on that higher dose. So now she's been taking like 6, she went up to 12. She didn't get any increased benefit from 12 to 6. So she's been maintaining on 6 just because, and she had from a child tons of mercury, like tons of mercury, right? And this was just not budging on the test. And then we doubled the dose. So yeah, I'm not worried with the high dose. I've personally taken a jar a day, 150 grams, 30 tablespoons, which is not easy to do. I did that for 10 days in a row, tested myself, no increased aluminum accumulation in my tissue. So I did that prior to the case studies even, just to make sure it's safe. And I do high doses. But yeah, most people are taking, there's a lot of people that have been taking it for a long time, high doses, no mineral disturbances. It's all the indirect effect. If the zeolite is resulting in an inefficient detox, it could cause problems. At that point, you don't want to take it long term. If the zeolite is resulting in less stress on your body, you can take it for as long as you want. That's really the key. How is your body responding to it? Is it causing more stress or less stress? If it's causing more stress, obviously you don't want to be taking it very long.
Yeah, cool. And is there any complications with somebody who's just been taking it for a while and then just maybe can't afford it or just feels like stopping it? Would there be any like negative reactions there with just like cold turkey and the zeolite while you're kind of doing this detox and binding?
There could be. What I don't recommend is taking it for 5 or 6 days and then stopping, because a lot of time, not a lot, sometimes what happens is people start and it just right away opens up detox pathways and their body starts dumping these metals right from all over the body. And then their body is, you're taking the zeolite for a few days, your body's adjusting to, it has the zeolite to bind to this stuff to remove it out. If you stop taking, so the body keeps dumping, right, metals. If you stop taking the ZeoCharge suddenly, you have all this stuff the body dumped out. Now it doesn't have the assistance and your body has to deal with it on its own. And a lot of people feel absolutely awful. So that's what happens. Sometimes people will buy like a jar for their family and everyone takes a little bit and then they run out and then they all feel terrible. Not all, like a couple of them feel terrible. That's not uncommon. So what I recommend is always taking it nonstop for at least a month. Really, I would say at least 90 days, and then you can go off of it. I don't recommend pulsing on and off of it because the only reason that you would pulse on and off of a chelator or binder or zeolite is because it's causing stress and your body has to recover. But if the zeolite is de-stressing your body, if that's even a word, I use it all the time, it is now, de-stress. If it's reducing stress on the body, you don't need to go off of it because it's going off of it would actually cause more stress than staying on it, right? So, and what I've also found is that if you're only taking ZeoCharge for detox, you might have to take it for a number of months at a decent dose to actually start removing deeply stored stuff. That's the thing. So if you're pulsing on and off, your body has to get comfortable with the idea that this is coming in my body to assist in detox to get to the point where the body naturally dumps stuff. So one of my friends who was very skeptical of taking the zeolite, she actually didn't take it for the first 5 years I was selling it, of the other zeolite product, and then ZeoCharge came and she still wouldn't take it. Very, very sensitive to supplements, right? She sees doctors for like chronic Lyme, mycotoxin illness, all that. And I sent her the higher dose theory, and her husband read it and were like, okay, I'm going to try it. So I test her, and with the OligoScan, put her on 6 scoops, 6 tablespoons, and she's 105 pounds, right? Pretty small. 6 tablespoons, and I test her 30 days later, and then I've tested her a few times since, but she was so shocked with the results. Like, not only did she experience no reactions, but she experienced like a headache for the first 2 days, but then no reactions. She had this issue with chronic eye puffiness that she has never been able to resolve, like just chronic inflammation like under the eye. And she's taken like cholestyramine and ultra binder and all these other things and has done all the detox stuff under the sun with various practitioners. Nothing's been able to help. That went away after 3 days. And it stayed away. She went off the zeolite for 2 days. It came back immediately, the puffiness. Then she goes on it again, it goes away. So the point of the story is we test her. The first month, vitamins and minerals improved. Metals reduced a little bit, but not much. Like, not a lot of detox happening. It's more binding, probably mycotoxins and things. And then the next month, more reduction in metals. So at this point, the aluminum was down like 30% or so. So she's getting a really good reduction in metals. The vitamins improved more and the minerals. So everything's looking good. But then what happened was that on the 3rd month, we tested her again. And at this point, and she felt nothing. She's still feeling good, right? At this point on the 3rd test, her metals just skyrocket. Like her mercury, lead, cadmium just absolutely skyrocket, meaning her body dumps them. So she didn't even start detoxing for like 3 months, taking 6 tablespoons per day. And she was just shocked, but it just shows you that all the stuff she's done before was not detoxing her, and it's just really, really hard because the body resists detox if you're in a situation like that. So she took 6 tablespoons into the 3rd month, started detoxing. Now at this point, it did disturb the vitamin and mineral status because that initial dump of mercury and things was a stressful experience on the body. But it wasn't to the point where she ever felt a symptom. We tested her the next month, and we just kept her on the 6 tablespoons because she felt good. And then the next month, her minerals and vitamins naturally balanced themselves out because the body went on a cleanup phase. So the point of that was that you're probably going to have to detox for longer than you want to. It's not a thing where you take a 90-day protocol like I used to think and you get all these minerals out of your body. It's all up to your body, and your body will detox at its own pace. The longer you've been accumulating metals and the more chronic your condition, the slower naturally your body is going to detox, the longer you're going to have to be on the protocol. That's just how it works. So I would say sometimes you won't even start detoxing for a month or 2, potentially 3. So that's why I tell people, do at least like 6 months, really. You want to do at least 6 months on ZeoCharge if your goal is detox, which pretty much that's what people are buying, right? So at that point you can maintain and whatever. But yeah, it's just, I've learned a lot through the case studies. One thing, body detox is up to the body. Another thing, it takes longer than you want it to. Another thing, just the limitation of chelators and other detox products. But yeah.
Yeah, very, very similar to the HTMA stuff that I talk about a lot on my show with it takes a few months for your body to gain that energy to feel comfortable to even want to dump anything. And same, we've talked about this on the phone, like similar to when the metals raise on the test, we're celebrating that, right? So if you see that on the OligoScan sometimes, I've even had on the OligoScan, which we'll talk about next, is where like my cadmium was really high, like you seen. Then there was a test like 2 tests ago where it went down, and then this last one it's back up again. So it's like, I'm not concerned that I'm like ingesting all of this cadmium. I'm hopeful that that's dumping through the mineral balancing, through the ZeoCharge, and those are just going to kind of fluctuate over time. And so people might be concerned if they see like a metal raised on any one of these hair tests, or whatever testing mechanism they're using. But if you're doing an effective detox, that could, I mean, most likely is a good thing, and that we're moving stuff around. But let's talk about the OligoScan a little bit real quick. You love this device. What is it exactly measuring? What's the technology behind it? Let people know what it is.
Yeah, so this thing, I was on the waiting list for this thing a number of years ago, and it would have changed my entire clinic when I had the biohacking center, but I got it a little bit later, just like over just a year and a half ago. But basically, it's technology out of Europe, and it's measuring tissue levels of heavy metals, essential minerals, and a few vitamins, and it's measuring the levels in the tissue of your hand. And this is through spectrophotometry. So basically, what it's doing is that you've got this device, spectrophotometer, and it's shooting light 4 millimeters deep into 4 different points on your hand. And then it measures the reflection of the elements, and that's how they can determine what's in there. So, really interesting. I mean, it's kind of similar to a lot of lab tests where you get your blood drawn and you send it to the lab, and they're using some sort of light, some sort of spectrometry or whatever to shine light to measure the reflection. Kind of similar to that, except now it's actually a live sample. It's in your hand still. So I like it because, one, when you have all these other methods, like a blood test for heavy metals is measuring what's currently circulating. And you're going to get a lot of false negatives because if your body is storing the metals in tissue and organs and it's not actively removing them, that's not going to show up in your blood. The urine tests are going to be measuring only what's being excreted through natural processes. And even the hair is only measuring what's being excreted, right? And I like the hair test too. The hair test is completely, I mean, primarily used for the mineral balancing, so it's a little bit different. You can't really do that with the OligoScan because the ratios are off, but I use the OligoScan in a little different way. But the hair test is great too, but it's only really measuring what's being excreted as the baseline test. And of course, you can use challenge tests with all these methods to get more information. But with the OligoScan, your initial test is actually measuring a tissue level. So that's where on my level 3 levels, you've got level 1 kind of circulating and exposure, level 2 general tissue, level 3 organs. The OligoScan is measuring level 2 toxicity right off the bat, which is cool. So when you do a retest and the metals rise, you know that they're coming from a deeper level than general tissue. So they basically have to be coming from organs. So I think it's incredible because on all the other testing methods, if your levels rise, which you want them to rise on all the tests, assuming you have stored metals, you don't exactly know if they're coming from level 2 or level 3 or both. With the OligoScan, you actually know right off the bat you're testing level 2 as a baseline. So when you the metals rise, you know they're coming from organs, in my opinion. So that's the reason I like it. It's instant as well. You don't have to do a blood draw. You get the results right away, and there's no false. You can't get a false positive because it's just spectrophotometry. It's incredibly reproducible as well, right? So a lot of people will read. Sometimes nothing happens, and that it's not like it doesn't really fluctuate. Some of the other methods, there can be some issues. They're all good tests. I actually like blood, urine, hair, and the OligoScan. They're not really even competitors. They're just all, ideally you get them all, and they're complementary tests. The OligoScan works really well for me for the case studies. That's why I like it. But yeah, it's a great test in my opinion.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool to kind of, it's, like you said, it's different than the hair test and the ratios are different. So it's hard to tell, but it's cool to see the minerals fluctuate on there. And there's all the different heavy metals because one thing, like you said, they're complementary. Like my cadmium's barely moved on my hair, but it's fluctuating a lot on the OligoScan. And, Aaron, my practitioner, he said, cadmium actually likes to be excreted through the urine. So it's less likely that it even shows in the hair. So if we see a little movement at all in the hair, we know that you're most likely moving around a lot more than what actually is dumped into your hair because it likes to, go out through the organs of elimination. And that's the idea with hair as well, is we're trying to use other organ supplementation, kidneys, we're doing ox bile, things that are trying, the coffee enemas, the saunas, things that are opening up those organs of elimination so that mainly you're excreting the metals that way if possible. And the hair just gives us an idea of what's actually moving around. It's not, doesn't mean that all of the metals that you've eliminated are just pouring out through your hair. Your hair would probably be falling out, and sometimes that happens on the mineral balancing stuff. People get a little scared about that. But if the liver and stuff's backed up a little bit and it needs to come out of the hair, sometimes that can be stressful on the hair follicles as well. But it's been cool to see the difference in the metals and the fluctuations, and how you kind of showed me it, and I've noticed it too, is like if you've had them silver amalgam fillings, aka mercury amalgam fillings, where you'll see the silver and the mercury kind of lining up on the OligoScan. So that's been interesting because I'm like, I know I had so many of those, and I always thought that was one of my core issues. So it's a cool technology. I don't think any of them are perfect. We're just kind of working with what we have just because of how deeply stored all of these metals are. So we're just all trying to maneuver this heavy metal world, which is becoming more and more prevalent. I think, I mean, when you talk to the mineral balancing people, and I'm sure you've probably seen this as well, I think you and Jeff even talked to other Jeff from OligoScan, talked about this on that podcast you guys did. Is basically, they say they haven't seen anybody who's never moved any metals around. And I think you guys said that as well with the OligoScan stuff. It's just pretty much we're generations in of industrialization, and the ubiquity of the metals within the environment is like, and then also the mineral depletion of the soil. If we had more nutritious food and we were growing our own food and eating locally and on really good soil, we would have less of an affinity to even latch onto the metals in general, because your body would prefer the mineral. But that's really not the case. We're eating apples and shit that are like 10 months old or whatever. They're spraying a peel or wax or whatever on them, and they've been plucked before they're ripe. And there's just so many broken parts of the food system that make supplementation and binding and everything just what the 21st century is, unless we turn back into this panacea where everyone's doing regenerative biodynamic farming. But even then, it's going to take decades and decades to rebuild and remineralize the soil anyways. So we got to kind of be proactive with some of these. And it sucks. People, I know they probably bring this up to you as well, as like, you got to take all these supplements and do all these biohacks and things to be healthy. And it's just like, you don't have to, but you're more than likely going to break down. I was blessed to break down when I was 30, so I knew that wasn't normal. But it's going to happen to you. Maybe you're luckier than me. Maybe you're 50, maybe you're 60, but you're going to start to have that brain fog or something creep up on you. So if you don't want to, experience that, you definitely want to be proactive.
Yeah, I tell people, hey, living in the 21st century, you're not going to be healthy by accident. Like, you're not going to stay healthy by accident anymore. You have to do something to take control of your health, whether you like it or not, because it's like, just the toxicity out there. And I don't even think heavy metals are the number one thing. That's what we talk about because we've got good testing to measure it. Such as it, I mean, even all heavy metal testing, as you mentioned, is kind of limited because nothing can really test like organ metals and all that, but we've got the data. The main thing is to measure whatever test you're using, primarily HTMA and the OligoScan, to measure the trend on if your body's moving the metals. What you don't want is for stagnation where everything is just stuck. That's really what you don't want. So as long as you're getting movement, you can kind of assume things are rolling. But I think one of the main issues is just the other toxic stressors in life that are allowing these heavy metals to accumulate. I think that's one of the main issues. And the other, the glyphosates and the environmental plastics and all these other things that sometimes we're not testing for as much, but all these things are just destroying enzymes in our body and slowing down detox functions. So we end up with these super high levels of metals, and it's just harder to be healthy. And when you're not healthy, you're automatically going to have higher levels of metals because your detox pathways aren't functioning, right? So I think there's just so many things that we just have to do something. Like if you just sit around and do nothing, it's like, it's probably going to catch up to you sooner rather than later at this point.
Yeah, it's super bizarre, but I mean, at least there's technologies, at least there's research, and there's ways you can improve, in my opinion, whatever. It does seem like we're seeing people get sicker and sicker. I think some of the HTMA people, they talk about like the copper toxicity and the heavy metal toxicity within children is like unlike what they've ever, the research of like Dr. Paul Eck and the people doing it back in the like 60s and 70s and 80s and even 90s. I think kids generally were still born relatively healthy, even if the parents weren't perfect. But nowadays, it's, a couple decades later, it's not the same. The kids are already in like burnout phase as far as like what we can see on the hair test and the low hormonal function right at birth, which is like unheard of because usually kids are just popping out with like tons of energy. They're still normal, even if the parents, aren't on this strict paleo diet with supplements. But, it's gradually building over time where the kids are just being exposed and becoming sick. And I think that's probably where, it sucks to say, but humans really don't change until there's like a breakdown. And I think that we kind of have to beat our heads off the wall and before we engineer stuff. And like, that's why I'm not too worried about even like the environmental pollution and stuff, because I feel like, if it gets bad enough, humans are smart enough to engineer themselves out of it. And I think that's just the way we work. We don't change much unless, something breaks down or we really need to. Once our back's against the wall, besides that, we just like, go about our day, hang out, live life, and just keep doing what we're doing until it gets too bad, and then we're like, oh shit, how do we pull ourselves out of this? And that's kind of what's happening with health, I think. One last little topic before we get off here, I wanted to jump into is you have another product, the Fulvic product, and I know you said there's a lot of kind of misinformation and stuff around Fulvic. Do you want to dive into that a little bit before we jump off?
Sure, it's really more confusion, and because it kind of is confusing because you've got so many products, and is it fulvic acid, is it humic acid, and is it a liquid, all this stuff, and a lot of things are marketed as like a humic substance, but it's actually fulvic acid is so it's very confusing because technically fulvic acid is a humic substance. So you've got humic is like the larger particle size, and fulvic is going to be the smaller particle size, and there's different sources of these things. So you've got like deep soil reserves that are pretty rich in like fulvic. Fulvic is like a molecule that naturally is present in soil. It's kind of a result of like the microbial activity, and just it's this compound that's generated. And what it does in the soil is it's a natural chelator where it'll attach itself to the minerals in the soil, and it's a transport system. So it'll transport these minerals to the plant cells and make them bioavailable. So it's a very interesting substance. Now, just in general, I'd say we all have fulvic acid deficiencies because our soil's so jacked up, right, and destroyed. So that's where taking a fulvic acid supplement can be helpful. I like to refer to it kind of as an optimizer, a mineral and nutrient optimizer. Just like in the plants, when you take a fulvic acid supplement, it can help transport these minerals to where they need to go, make them more bioavailable. It's kind of a bioenhancer. It's a delivery system, and it also can attach itself to some of the toxic metals and sometimes make them less toxic as well and transport them out of the body. Humic acid, and a lot of the soil sources don't really have high sources of humic. It's more fulvic. Humic acid generally comes from like leonardite, which is like an aged coal, basically, like a charcoal almost. And they're extracting this larger, stickier substance called humic, and that's a little bit different. They're both kind of binders. Fulvic is tiny, so it's more of like a full body cellular detox. Humic is staying in the gut. Humic acid is a lot of times marketed for like infections, like viral infections, because there's some research indicating it can kind of stop the replication, but it's really less detox. So fulvic acid is more detox. Humic acid is more like microbial binding in the gut. And then you've got kind of combo products. Some people say you need both and they're mixing them. And I mean, for example, with my other company, I sell a 98% pharmaceutical grade humic acid. So it's just straight humic. And then here I'm selling kind of a complex. But when you look on the market and you see fulvic or humic, you have no idea what you're getting. Like there's no way to know what it is. And then you've got the liquids and how much is in there. And it's like how much fulvic to how much, like you want to actually get the milligrams of fulvic acid and humic acid, because most people take this soil sample and they put it in a capsule and they call it fulvic acid. It's a fulvic complex, but how much fulvic acid is actually in there? And we don't know, that's why most companies don't tell you. And the same with humic acid. Sometimes it's like 5% humic acid and they're marketing it as humic acid supplement. Whereas we've got like a 98%, it's just kind of confusing. So what Fulvic charges, that's our product. It does have some humic acid in it, but it's primarily a fulvic acid product because it's more of a detox and mineral optimizer. And what we've done is we've taken our two favorite sources of fulvic. One of them is a deep soil reserve, and they recently did testing on this reserve for like, I think it was like 1,000 contaminants, and there was no trace of any contaminant found. Like this is like out in the boonies, middle of nowhere, like deep down in the earth, they're getting this stuff, and it's got like 40 to 50% fulvic acid concentration, but then it's got all of the other rare earth nutrients too. And that's another thing. Some companies will take the fulvic acid from soil and extract it out and sell that in a liquid, which is, I'm not saying that's not good, that is good. It's a yellowish color. Fulvic itself is colorless, kind of yellow. What we're selling is a fulvic complex where you have the fulvic acid naturally occurring in nature and the co-nutrients that it's naturally attached to. So basically you're getting a fulvic acid supplement and you're getting the co-nutrients. So for like this one that we're using from the deep soil reserve, it's got tons of organic acids. It's got like 60 plus essential minerals. It's got all sorts of really rare stuff in there, even like shikimic acid, which was one of the things that was kind of popular for spike protein from the spike pine needle tea. It was the shikimate or shikimic acid that was responsible for that. Anyway, it's got all sorts of weird stuff in it. Not weird, but like good stuff that you're probably not getting, just micronutrients. And I think because our soil is so depleted, it's almost like a soil supplement, like to help us with the soil depletion. So when you take that, it's one, giving you fulvic acid, which we should be getting in our diets anyway, which we're really not because of the soil. And then you're getting a lot of these co-nutrients. So it's a mineral supplement in itself, plus it's helping deliver the minerals, and it's a delivery system. So if you're also taking other supplements like a CoQ10 or something else, it helps deliver those to your cells. And it helps with detox. So it does a little bit of everything. That's the one source. So half of the capsule is that. The other half is a purified shilajit extract. So shilajit is another source of fulvic acid. It's got over 50, our source is over 50% fulvic in concentration, but then it has a whole nother array of micronutrients. So these, shilajit is this tar, this resin that kind of comes out from the Himalayas. So it's going to be a completely different nutrient profile. So both of them have fulvic acid, which kind of does the same thing, but then the co-nutrients are different. That's why we combined them, because they were our two favorite sources, and we like them both. The fulvic acid, or sorry, the shilajit is going to have more adaptogenic properties. So beyond fulvic, it's got these compounds called urolithins, and it's adaptogenic. It helps with, like, there's studies on the one we use, quite a few studies for like mitochondrial health, and even like performance at the gym, increasing testosterone production in men, all sorts of stuff, bone health, improving bone markers. So we kind of combined them to get the best. And our serving size is 2 capsules. And in 2 capsules, you're getting 1,000 milligrams of the powder, so 500 milligrams of each. And that's a total of 500 total milligrams of fulvic acid, which is honestly really high. And then you've got 500 milligrams of other co-nutrients, including the adaptogenic stuff and mitochondrial support and everything else. And when you look at, and that's all on the website, but you can take that and compare it to the other products so you actually know what you're getting. Because a lot of the other products are very good too with fulvic. It's just usually there's such a low dose. And that's kind of what we do with our, we have a third product I can mention too that's releasing this week. But what we've done is taken the products that, the best quality, but also things that can be taken at the therapeutic dose. So with fulvic, you look at like some of the most popular liquid, and a lot of the liquids, the label says they have about 5 milligrams of fulvic. And we're offering 500 milligrams for 2 capsules. So you're getting 100x. It's just that a lot of the products on the market are marketed for healthy people at low doses, and they're expensive, so they can cut the price a little bit. We're really focused more on people that aren't where they want to be. And you just need more nutrition. You need more, just higher doses of stuff to get to that point. So that's kind of what we tailor it to. So yeah, I really like the fulvic. I take it every day, 2 caps. I've been popping 4 caps recently just for fun. But just, I mean, it's a lot of people really notice a nice burst of energy from it. But I like ZeoCharge, kind of go in, sop up some of the toxicity out with the bad. Then you've got this Fulvic charge as an optimizer to help remineralize and to help optimize some of the other minerals that you're taking. And then the third product that we're releasing is PhytoCharge, which is a marine phytoplankton concentrate. So really excited about it. It's actually one of my favorite overall ingredients. There was some issues sourcing it the last couple of years. That's why I didn't launch it initially with the company, but I was just able to get it. And this was another one that I started on like 7 years ago. And probably the most nutrient not it is the most nutrient dense food available by weight. Like nothing comes close. I was talking to one of the manufacturers of that blue green algae AFA. This was years ago because I had it in my product line, and she said that she thought that was the most nutrient dense food in the world until they came across this new phytoplankton. She said it was hundreds of times more nutrient dense than even the AFA algae. So I'm like, well, how do I get it? I want it in my body immediately. Like, what's going on? And they were mixing like 1% of it in with their powders because it's a really expensive ingredient. Anyway, so now we're offering that, and it's going to be 500 milligrams per capsule, by far the highest dose on the market. Just because I really love this stuff at a higher dose. The next highest dose you can get of this particular marine phytoplankton is 75 milligrams on the market. And we're offering it for $59 for 30 caps for 500 milligrams per capsule. And when you look at phytoplankton supplements, most of them are liquids. The dose is deceptive because they're using a phytoplankton paste. So 500 milligrams on a liquid phytoplankton is actually like 50 milligrams of a powder because the paste is mostly water and they're including the water content. So this particular ingredient I'm using is also available in a paste and liquid, and the powder is 10 times as concentrated because they've dehydrated it and stabilized it. So when we're looking at 500 milligrams of this stuff, it's like 5,000 milligrams of these others. And most of these companies, a lot of these companies are giving you like 25 milligrams because honestly, it's one of the most expensive ingredients. Because what they do we have time to talk about this?
No, you're
I'm kind
good.
of going off on a rant. All right. So I'm really excited. I've actually been taking this stuff. I didn't have access to it for a couple of years. I just started taking it 2 weeks ago, and it's given me a huge burst in energy. Like, I just realized it last night. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I'm on the roof, like cleaning up stuff. Like, I'm on the other roof. Like, I'm just like going for town, like the last couple of days. Um, but what they do, it's a unique source of plankton too. So it's in the Vancouver Islands, like in Canada, and they source it where the Pacific Ocean meets fresh water. So it's this really unique body of water where there's hundreds of natural species of phytoplankton that grow. So really interesting. And what they do, because the problem with algae and phytoplankton is a microalgae. So most of the chlorella, spirulina, kelp, they're macro, large algae. You can see them. These phytoplankton are microscopic. You can't even see them with the human eye out in nature. They're tiny. So what they have to do, and most things from the sea can be problematic because they're all contaminated with radioactive materials and with that's why I generally stay away from a lot of algae for those reasons, even unless they're like not lab grown, but with the phytoplankton, what they do is they naturally source the phytoplankton from this source in the ocean mixed with seawater, but then they take it to their sea farm, this massive facility where they have 1,000,000-liter tanks, and they put that, just a couple buckets full of this phytoplankton in there, and then they have the natural sunlight and they mimic the natural way for it to reproduce, and this stuff starts reproducing, and they highly concentrate it. It's like billions of times the concentration, and then they turn it into a paste and a powder. So the amount of phytoplankton you get from this stuff is incredible. Like you just can't get it you can't do it naturally. You can't get phytoplankton sourced naturally because you would never be able to get enough phytoplankton from the ocean, and it would be contaminated. So you have to do it through these sea farms, and there's one in Spain, and then there's one here one in Canada, which is where I'm using because it's a different source. Really interesting stuff. So it's super clean. You don't have to worry about the contamination, and they just source it to billions of times the normal strength, put it in this powder, and you're getting just tons of nutrition. Because there's so many species of the plankton present, it's like almost combining like a chlorella, spirulina, all these other you're just combining so many species together, and you're getting a vast array of nutrients. So that's kind of like the nourish supplement, like pure cellular nutrition. So that's why those are like the trifecta, the detox trio. ZeoCharge is out with the bad, PhytoCharge is in with the good, and then the Fulvic charge is optimize. So those three as a foundation to your other protocols is like, I'm here
Yeah,
for it.
no, that sounds dope. Might have to try. I actually, I love spirulina and chlorella in general. The company Energy Bits. I'm actually going to do a show with them.
Yeah.
I think the end of this month. I have her booked. And they have some super dope, like really high quality when it comes to spirulina and chlorella products. So does the phytoplankton? I actually don't take it right now. Caveat because I'm really focused on this mineral balancing thing. Once I balance out over a while, I think I might add in like one product at a time because they're, the HTMA practitioners are really worried about taking another mineral substance, and that might throw
Right.
off the minerals that you're taking. So once I balance out and I want to be more experimental, I might like add in maybe phytoplankton or energy bits for 3 months or 6 months and see if that shifts anything negatively or positively, or add in something like Fulvic or Sheila G, play around with it, because they're more like, I'm just more open minded. I'm like, whatever, I'll play around with it. If I'm doing the testing every 2 to 3 months, we'll see whether, it gets better or worse over time. So, but I'm going to wait till I balance out and really see, especially because I'm kind of in the research mode with the OligoScan and your products and that. So I've been limited on all the things that I'm trying right now. But with the phytoplankton, is it very similar to spirulina and chlorella as far as like the minerals and the like heavy metal binding stuff and all, like, because when I used to take energy bits for a while, and there was another brand, I can't remember the name, I would get off Amazon that was really clean. I would have like the most amazing gut function. I feel like I had less cravings. Like it was like the nutrition from it made me feel full, even though there was like no calories almost. It was pretty bizarre. Like the energy boost, less cravings, better bowel movements. Is it similar or is it just better, or what is it?
It's just different. So, and initially, actually, our product that we were going to launch with Zeolite Labs was like a macro and microalgae. So we had the AFA, we had phycocyanin extracts, spirulina extracts, all that. But one, from I'm only making stuff that I take personally, and I just wasn't taking it. Like I don't know what it was. Like it didn't taste that great, and it's just with the capsules I can pop it every day. I take the zeolite every day too, but that's one thing I was like, I wanted to make something that can pack the same punch as all that in a capsule because it's so much more nutrient dense than all the algae. Now it's different. So this is not like the algae are very high in chlorophyll, right? That's why they're going to be greenish and bluish and all these colors, which has benefits in it of its own. This has very little chlorophyll. It's not even that greenish. It's like a light green. It's got other pigments. It's got like the fucoxanthins and some of these other things, polysaccharides. It's got a lot of other nutrients, but I like it because like if you could take spirulina, chlorella, AFA algae, kelp, and all the others and combine them into one, you would be getting such an incredible amount of minerals, which a lot of people do, and I think it's very helpful actually, as long as it's a pure source and all that other stuff. This one, it's like that, except you're getting hundreds of species of this plankton in one capsule. And because it's so much more nutrient dense, because they've magnified it so many times, it's even better than the algae. It's like hundreds of times more nutritious than the algae. Now, if you're taking like a bunch of scoops of this algae, and you're getting like 30 grams of it, opposed to one capsule of the phytoplankton, maybe it's going to be equivalent, just based on the weight. I don't know. I don't know the exact comparison. I have nothing against algae. I actually really like it. I think it's an incredible product. The results, like you said, they kind of speak for themselves. But the phytoplankton is nice because one, it's just in one capsule, you can get incredible cellular nutrition. And I personally have noticed a bigger difference on that than all the algae I've tried in terms of energy and mental clarity. Like the first time I ever took it 7 years ago, I popped had it in a powder. I put to like a half teaspoon or so. I couldn't sleep.
Mm.
That like I was up to like 5 a.m. Like, and I took it in like so it was crazy. Like, and nothing usually affects me like that. So I was like, there's something to it. And I was actually conducting a little study on it a couple years ago with a device called the Brain Gauge because I was selling the same product under a different name temporarily with my other company until the product was unavailable for a while. And I only tested a few people, but this device was testing like mental 6 markers of mental sharpness, and I tested them, had them come back 4 hours later after taking 2 capsules of this, retested them, and 3 out of the 4 had significant cognitive function improvement. The only one who didn't, the fourth lady, was because during the 4 hour period, she went home and like scrubbed all of her floors and like cleaned the whole house and like wore herself out. So her results were going to be worse. But yeah, just for mental clarity, I was actually marketing it for brain health before. It's got some of the fatty acids and stuff too, but just it's got some rare nutrients. I think because my initial research into glycobiology, I discovered that one of the species of phytoplankton had a compound called N-acetyl acid, which is it's one of the rare rare saccharides that our cells. There's 8 saccharides that our cells need for cellular communication, and that's one of them. And in nature, there's very few sources of it. Like breast milk is one of them, I think. I have to remember, this is so long ago. I know like sea cucumber, aloe vera, lion's mane mushroom, and a few other things, but they're all things that are incredible for your brain. So when you look at lion's mane mushroom, it's the brain mushroom, right? It's the mushroom that's primarily focused on like nerve growth factor and brain health. It's the only medicinal mushroom known that has this compound, N-acetyl acid. So I think that it's probably the N-acetyl acid in part that's actually responsible for some of those brain boosting effects of lion's mane. So it's kind of interesting stuff. But the aloe vera was the only known thing that had all of these 8 essential saccharides up until I discovered a few years ago that this phytoplankton extract had all 8 too.
Oh, wow.
In a different array. So yeah, just for cell health and cellular communication, pretty cool stuff. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's got a bunch of stuff in it. I like it. It's kind of an energy. It's just a nice boost. I think, ZeoCharge, I say, is the foundation. And then if you want a little energy boost, bam, phytoplankton, optimization, Fulvic. And that's really good, especially if you're not taking other stuff. If you're taking a bunch of other stuff, kind of like you always want to be considerate of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So if you're doing an HTMA mineral balancing program, you probably don't want to be adding in a bunch of mineral supplements in addition to what you're doing, right? Like it's all about timing as well. So like to your point, ZeoCharge, great, but maybe the other ones hold off on. There's a time and a place for it all.
Yeah, for sure. And especially the more I learned about vitamin and mineral interactions being in the HTMA course and how they can really mess with each other. So I take some nootropics here and there. I take a sleep supplement, but that has very small amounts of minerals in there, like a tiny bit of zinc and magnesium, but I don't think it's enough to really, move the needle. And there's just a couple things that I take, NAD here and there, but yeah, I'm trying to be pretty basic with it to and so far I've, with the ZeoCharge, I haven't seen any negative effects on the HTMA or the OligoScan. So, I mean, for now, it's looking promising, and it's been quite a while now, 6, 7 months, whatever it's been. So I'm going to keep doing it and just, give you all that data at some point, and with the OligoScan and the HTMA, and do with that as you please. Make a file, put it on the website, whatever. And for anybody listening, we do have a discount code. You can get 10% off, I believe, everything over on the website with the code ITP, just short for Integrative Thoughts Podcast. And why don't you tell everybody the actual name of the website, where to find your YouTube, anything like that?
Yeah, so the company is zeolitelabs.com, zeolitelabs.com, and there's quite a few resources. Most of the resources are going to be on the website because I really don't have social media. I technically have an Instagram page, with 0 posts. So you can follow it if you want in case I ever start posting stuff. It's just really not my thing, socials right now. So I tend to put all of the information on the website. There's also a YouTube channel, Zeolite Labs, that has some videos as well. But I've put a lot of those videos on the website too. So if you're interested, I would check out the website and really look at some of the information. There's an education tab, which has quite a few videos that really go into it. Some stuff. There's some of my thoughts on detox, and then there's dosing guide. There's all sorts of stuff. You can also see the third-party testing documents on that page, all that. There's a case studies page as well that is just going to be showing a lot of these specific case studies using the OligoScan. And that's, so if you really want to get into it, there's hours worth of information for the deep dive. Also that higher dose theory, if you want to check that out, that's on the education page as well. You can click a link from there, check it out. Yeah, so I'd mainly go to the website, check it out. And then the general recommendation, hey, if you have some sort of detox reaction, I would take more. But really, just educate yourself first on it. That's ideal with it, because anytime you're doing any sort of detox protocol, you want to understand what's happening in your body and all of the possibilities so that you know what to do if a reaction occurs, type of thing. And you can reach out, feel free to reach out with any questions, email, and I'll get back to you, help you out.
Awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge. Always love chatting with you. I feel like you'll be a person who will like continue to maybe release cool products that are unique, and we'll continue the conversation and we'll do some more shows around them.
Absolutely. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Later. Cool. I think you just got to stick around while it uploads. Usually just takes a couple seconds. Every once in a while, it's weird.
Got quite a bit,
Yeah.
quite a bit covered there.